lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, it's just waiting.
Matt Williams got a brilliant start from the third row of the grid.
He's gone, he's hit him, he's straight off at the chase.
And a half-second lead. Oh, with the simmering car in the background.
He has it. Oh, he's round on the last lap.
There's a massive accident.
Next to the inside, what a move, what a move.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to round number 3 of the Automobilista Australia Supercars Championship for 2020. It's the annual pilgrimage across Bass Strait to the Apple Isle of Tasmania, to the circuit that we always visit for supercars in Symmons Plains Raceway. Of course, the other circuit on the Apple Isle is the much maligned raceway known as Baskerville, and of course that circuit played host to some improved production nationals last year, but it doesn't host anything to do with supercars. The aptly named Symmons Plains Raceway, which in our land of AMS Oz is now referred to as Brian Walsh Raceway, after the native Tasmanian himself. But it's not so much the name of this circuit that everybody's worried about tonight, it's the near capacity grid, and it is the championship leader who is perfect through the opening couple of rounds of season 2020. On behalf of the AMS Oz group and of course the Outworld Broadcasting team, a very happy Easter, because it's the beginning of a long weekend for a number of people in this country, so happy Easter from myself and everybody here tonight. And of course, my name is Steve DeVries, and I'm aptly joined, as per usual, by the man who is the encyclopedia of all things supercars in Hans Brunswick.
Good evening, Steve, and good evening to everyone out there. It's fantastic to be returning to back to my little corner at in AMS Oz Supercars. I was moonlighting as someone who knows anything about GT3, but no, I was just providing extra comments there. Really enjoyed the race at the Red Bull Ring, which was fantastic, but we go to a completely different circuit here. The Tassie Twin Sprint at the affectionately named Brian Walsh Plains. Brian Walsh is making his return tonight, so I'm very happy about that. And also, we are looking to see a bit more, a bit more of the racing that we've seen already, Steve. And, the Tassie Symmons Plains circuit will certainly turn it on.
Yeah, no doubt. Very much looking forward to seeing what this circuit can deliver. It's a little bit of a different looking circuit compared to last year, so big thanks to our friends over at Automobilista Supercars Championship for the loan of the circuit, and to this man who's been doing a bit of work getting the visuals for this circuit up and running as well. He's going to give us a bit of his time tonight with some special comments, and that's Lewis Wedding.
Well, thank you. Thanks for joining me, and obviously thank you for ASC to obviously give us this version of the track, and then obviously Kurt Stenberg then fixing it so the frames were fixed and can run smoothly for everybody.
Yeah, that was one thing that we did have a little bit of trouble in, and eventually it has been solved, which is great to see. And again, big thanks to the guys at ASC. So a number of those guys actually are running every now and again in the series, and it is ASC's Kurt Stenberg who does lead this championship at the moment. So that's the man who everybody is chasing coming into tonight's proceedings. But before we get to tonight's proceedings, let's have a little bit of a look at what happened in the previous round. So here is your highlights from the Melbourne Twin Sprint at Albert Park for the Albert Park Grand Prix circuit. And it was, in fact, Kurt Stenberg and Thomas McMillan, actually, who led away into Turn 1 to begin the opening race of the two-race format, the sprints format, as we like to call it here in Automobilista Australia. Everyone got through the opening couple of corners pretty cleanly, which was very, very good on the opening lap for a very tight opening sequence of corners. Interesting battle. Will Devonish sort of dropped back a couple of spots at the beginning of the start, and then Foley started to fade very, very early and found himself getting mugged around the back end of the circuit here into the turn 11 and 12 chicane. Ultimately, he'd pull ahead for just a little bit. Then Will would seize his opportunity down here at the second last corner, and then he'd set out in pursuit of the guys ahead. He had to do it twice, though. He had to have a go down there, and then it was Foley who would make the mistake a bit later on in the second lap, and that allowed Will through. Foley came out basically back into a sandwich with the HDS Racing Team cars here and his other teammate Phil Boak at the back of this pack. So it was Ford Holden for quite a bit in the top half of the top 10. Steve Burko was giving Aaron Thomas quite a run for his money. This was a nice little juicy battle a bit further down the order. Not too many mistakes, but Aaron defended pretty well on from Steve Burko in that Volvo. And then, of course, we just mentioned it just a few moments ago, there was this little battle pack between the two HDS Loose Sim Sport cars and the PBF cars. And this is the cardinal sin, but they managed to make this work. You normally don't come in and stop together. Of course, it's compulsory pit stops in the sprint format these days, but AMS being what AMS does, they managed to make it work. These two out in front, however, were having a good scrap for their own battle hands. These two were locked together and losing time hand over fist to Will Devenish as they scrapped.
This was a fantastic battle. Thomas McMillan made the pass on Kurt Stenberg, and Kurt Stenberg got him right back, coming through one of the curve straights at Albert Park. And you can see Thomas McMillan there. He didn't want to yield, but he eventually had to, as he just got a poor run out through the AstroTurf there. And now they both pitted together. And this actually ended up really opening the door for Will Devenish. And even they exit together. And now here comes Will Devenish on the right side of screen. And he comes in and tries to make that move. And he ends up being in the sandwich in between them. And now he's going to go from third, basically straight into the lead as they came out of the pit lane. Thomas McMillan and Kurt Stenberg falling behind Will Devenish, Steve.
Yeah, that was a fantastic move. Will made the best of it coming out of the pits a couple of laps early. This was a near disaster. Rhodey exiting stage right, just in front of the leaders, so very lucky not to get cleaned up there. Will couldn't hang on though. He went deep at the second last corner and let the two aforementioned previous race leaders through, and he just couldn't quite stay with them till the very end as well. He would never get another chance to repass in that opening race, and honours would go to Stenberg from McMillan and Devenish in that particular stanza. So your race results, top 12 from that particular race. There they are there. 2.2 seconds separating the top three on that one. A bit further down the order there, you can see Phil Boak actually earned himself a 15-second post-race penalty for a little bit of contact with Lewis Wedding. That ultimately meant that Lewis finished outside that top 12 there. So that dropped him from 4th in the standings to 6th. So a little bit of a penalty and points to pay there. Then we got on to race 2, which was actually a little bit more tame compared to the stanza that was race 1. Again, everybody got a pretty good start. Foley, you can see there, ducking and weaving off to the right-hand side of the track as he got a pretty good start. Couldn't make a huge fist of it. Devenish would fight tooth and nail with Thomas McMillan for the opening couple of corners of this race. Plenty of door handle to door handle action. All's fair in love and war. They bumped and ground for a little bit and they got on with it.
Yeah, they managed to live to fight another day after that, but it was very wild and willing in the opening stanza. And we're seeing some of the PBF cars, the two PBF cars, they're going at it into turn 1. So that's actually Boak, he's leading Foley. And Foley, he actually looked down the inside, but he couldn't make the move at turn 1. And eventually he gets the move done later on because Boak made a little bit of a mistake coming out of turn 12. And that opened the door for Foley. So Foley was able to get up the inside. And wasn't without a bit of contact and a little bit of paint swapping. And then now Boak got back on the inside at turn 1 and slid it through turn 2, which opened the door again. And then a big moment for Foley, who ended up in the fence. But fortunately, he was able to keep going, Steve. Now we're going back to second place battle between Thomas McMillan and Will Devenish. And this was quite a willing battle, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah, this was very, very good and very closely hard fought, but ultimately the problem here was McMillan would lock a brake going down here into turn 13, which would actually send him off the road and actually into retirement. So there, spinning, having an issue of some nature, that pulled the pin on his race. There's plenty of fair racing up and down the field. Here we actually see Lewis Wedding and Termo going toe-to-toe. That's not something we'd normally say, but Lewis having to fight his way back through the field after race 1 to forget. This man was carving his way through the field en route to 4th place, Mitch Hathaway, so he picked off quite a number of cars on the run to the pit stop sequence, and ultimately that meant that he would come home, as we just said, in 4th place. Very lucky not to get collected by his satellite teammate here in Zach Ross. Pinched a brake, very nearly ran up the backside of that number 31 into turn 1 a bit later on in proceedings. But you couldn't fault this man. 2 from 2, 2 poles, 2 race victories, and on the season it now means 3 poles, 3 race victories, and a perfect round of points. So, race results from race 2 there. Stenberg had it a bit more comfortably in the end there from Will Devenish and Phil Boak. So, Holden's filling the podium spots in both races at the Melbourne Twin Sprint. But it's good to see the Fords are up there as well. They're still making a good fist of it. And when it comes to the team's points, we'll have a look at those a bit later on. Probably just after qualifying, we'll see how everything is going over there. Lewis, it's a pretty good spate of racing at the Albert Park Grand Prix circuit. Unfortunately, you were involved in a little bit of bump and grind, but it was still some pretty top-notch, top-level draw racing.
Yeah, there was some really good racing, at least from my point of view, sort of in the mid-pack and towards the front. First race, obviously, didn't quite. Our team had a bit of good luck and a bit of bad luck. Obviously, Mitch was up there, finally got past the two PBF cars and ended up off the road, and that obviously meant he started at the back for race 2. And obviously, the big accident that I had with Zach Ross meant that I started at the back for race 2. So we fought our way through the field in race 2 there, and there was some obviously fantastic racing in the first race with Will, obviously Kurt and Thomas right at the front there. That's some of the best racing we've had for a lead in any of the series that we've had. And in Supercars, I think that's probably the biggest sort of battle we've had for the lead in any series prior. So really good racing there. And then obviously second race as well. Had Mitch fantastic drive through the field to get some good racing done. And obviously early on, you had the two PBF cars going at it as well.
Yeah, you're right about race 1 for sure. That was probably the battle that we were really looking forward to all season, and it came early. It was like an early Christmas present for us. How on earth were people going to be able to get past the likes of Kurt Stenberg? And, well, it took people mixing it with themselves at the front, basically McMillan and Stenberg tripping over themselves, Hans, to bring people back into play.
I wouldn't say they were tripping over themselves, but they were fighting pretty hard, and by doing that, they were compromising themselves on the racing line. And unfortunately for them, but fortunately for Will Devenish, he managed to get back in, and Devenish, with one of the greatest moves I've ever seen in Automobilista Australia history, that he managed to split them both into turn 1, and then coming out of turn 2 into turn 3, he made the pass. He went from third up to second up to first in as many corners, and that showed that he had the superior strategy with the undercut. And unfortunately, it did come all undone for him with a mistake, as we now head into qualifying number 1 at Symmons Plains Raceway. Brian Walsh Plains, we affectionately call it, named after Brian Walsh, our our resident Tasmanian in Automobilista Australia. And good to see Brian Walsh back out there. And we've got a packed grid tonight of 24 cars. Fantastic.
Yeah, huge grid of cars tonight. Good to see that everybody's turning out. Of course, the COVID crisis is meaning that a lot of people have got a bit more time on their plate to come and do some sim racing, and we have seen some massive GT3 fields in the last 2 GT3 races. Of course, the most recent one being the Spielberg 60-minute race on Tuesday, which got up to 25 cars. Good to see that now Supercars are pulling their weight. We've had, sort of 16 or so cars turn up the first 2 rounds. Got a full complement of 25 tonight. Qualifying very, very important, because of course there is only the one qualifying session. The second race of the night being a progressive grid. Of course, the new format for this year, meaning that there is a compulsory pit stop to do in every race. The races have been lengthened to 90-kilometre sprints, so therefore you do need to stop at least once for fuel and tyres. Lewis, you're probably not going to make it on fuel tonight. You're going to have to probably stop around lap 30 if you want to do a full tank, but pit stops and choice of strategy is going to be very critical tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be crucial. The pit stops, obviously, remaining on the track is mighty important around here, just because of the length of the track. You're not going to get time lost if you make a mistake. You're not going to get that time back. So qualifying is important. And even though you've got obviously all these really tight corners and long straights, it's actually pretty difficult to pass because there's no real corners where you can sort of set up a move. You're sort of relying on a mistake and a bit of slipstream to get by. So this qualifying session is important. But yeah, as you said, the pit window is going to be between probably at the longest lap 32 if you're saving fuel, and if you want to play the reverse game, probably lap 7 to 8, probably be the earliest you can pit and make it home.
Probably wouldn't recommend splitting the strategy down the middle, as we hear a bit of collision down here, and that is Scott Stancliffe in the Mercedes, the Ash Walsh Mercedes-Benz E63, having a moment at the hairpin, just butchering the attempts of Scott Nolan and Mitch Hathaway, I think, that were on their flying laps. Lewis, you wouldn't split the strategy down the middle?
You can split the strategy, but I think the big thing with strategy around here, it's going to be where you are on the racetrack. If you're battling with people and you're in a big pack of cars, it's probably smart to probably get out of that and then pit a little bit early, try and get a little bit of an undercut and get some running in clear air. Otherwise, you know, you could get caught up in an accident and lose time to guys that you might be able to match or catch that are further down the road, but you're just stuck behind someone. So, and the reverse could be true if you're out in the lead. It's like, okay, I don't need to pit, I can just keep going, I'll save some tyres for the end of the race.
Well, there's been a bit of a coming together down here at turn number 1 and 2. That looks like it may have been Colin Warwick. Yep, so Colin Warwick has gone back to the pits, and who was he just with? That was one of the Erebus cars. I think that may possibly have been Liam Spencer. I'm not 100% sure. We'll have to have a bit of a look at that. Hans, we've got a number of wildcards in the field tonight as well, which is boosting the numbers. This is one of them, Lime Mitch. So he's been in the Super 2 series for the first opening couple of rounds. He's actually been leading that championship up inside the top 3 at the moment. So good to see some of the Super 2 guys making the jump across into the main game.
100% Steve, it's good to see some of the Super 2 guys in, like you said, but he usually drives a Holden in the Super 2 series, and he's jumped out and he's gone to the dark side. He's gone to the Ford, the blue oval. He's representing Henry Ford, and he's boosting his stocks in the Supercars series, in the AMS Oz Supercars series, and we're seeing him in the Mustang now. And Anthony Birch, he's done a really good job with the Mustang, so he's bringing up a few tweaks on it every now and then, and he's just a whisker under his personal best time, but he's still about 2/10 of a second off the best Sector 1 time set by Kurt Stenberg. And we're going to see what sort of run he gets through there now, because his run wasn't exactly clean, and you can see he's lost a bit more time there. So he's probably lost about closer to about 0.8 of a second. And Lime Mitch, he'll probably just finish this lap off, and he'll try and work on getting another good lap. But that's probably ruined his run into the first corner now, because he's actually burnt up the tyres coming out of the final corner. And you spend a lot of time turning here at Symmons Plains, so the tyres do take a bit of a beating, so you've got to be really careful. And we'll see if some of the cars, they do manage to take 4 tyres on in the pit stop, but it depends on the timing, because it is a 90k race, and unfortunately they may not have enough time to basically make that gain work. Looking at the other wildcard entry, or not the wildcard entry, but Colin Warwick, he's in the guest car. So this is Colin Warwick's first race tonight, and usually we see Thomas McMillan in this car, but another one of the ASC guys has come over, and Colin Warwick is not going that well at the moment. He's probably a fair way down the order than he would like. So he's in 8th, and let's see if he managed to bring up a bit more pace at the moment. But around him is Turmo and BDS, so they'll be pretty heartened by the fact that they're keeping up with someone of the calibre of Colin Warwick.
Yeah, they sure will. So Colin Warwick, of course, was registered for the series earlier in the year, has missed the first 2 rounds. I believe he actually had some troubles with his wheel and a couple of other things as well. So it's good to see him actually getting out there and having a run around. 52.4 being sort of back end of the top 10 in a 24 car field is not too terrible. Still gives you something to work with, and of course there's still plenty of time left on the clock here, so we're only just, actually we haven't even gotten to halfway yet, so still plenty of time on the clock. 50 odd second lap, low 50s, so 38 laps tonight will go very quickly for these drivers. At the moment, Kurt Stenberg, Will Devonish and Brenton Foley are all the men that are at the top of the timesheet. So it was Stenberg for a bit, Foley closed the margin down, Will Devonish got the advantage back, and now Stenberg's gone quicker again. I think times are starting to get very, very close to about a 51.4 or a 51.3. We're just waiting on live races to give us the feed. It's actually a 51.431 is the current quickest lap from Kurt Stenberg's in his TTR ZB Commodore. As we cycle through, see if we can pick where he is at the moment. Here he is actually on his next flying lap down to the hairpin, and just fractionally less than a 10th up on his PB and of course the pole time. There's going to be some different lines that people are going to take through the hairpin. We just saw Kurt Stenberg not fully pinch it down the apex, sort of ran around at the mid-track. Some people are going to pinch it down at the apex, some people are going to run the high line. Yeah,
what you'll find, obviously, that we've seen so far, obviously Kurt taken, so that was sort of the middle line. You can take an even wider line around the outside there, but that line he took there was perfect. He gained a little bit of time on his already, obviously, fastest time that he set, and once again goes 2/10 faster. So you can take the more traditional line to the inside, but what you'll find is you do sort of understeer a little bit wide on the exit, and you can't quite get the top speed down the straight because you're not quite accelerating quite as well. So what you'll find, you see people just brake a little bit later, turn in a little bit later, hanging around the outside because it's bermed a little bit, turn in later, get on the power earlier, straighten it out on that sort of concrete apron on the outside, and then just gun it down the straight. And you get probably a K or 2 difference down the straight, and obviously the acceleration is much, much better. So that's where you can find a lot of time. It's all about, though, hitting that braking point, because you don't want to miss your braking point by a metre or two, because you'll hit the little tyre bundle on the outside, which we've seen a lot in practice, or braking too early and obviously costing yourself time in the middle part of that corner.
And being the slowest corner on the circuit too, it's very, very important to drive off that corner because it leads onto the longest straight on the circuit. I mean, we call it a straight even though it's got a bend to the right in it that leads you up to turn 6, but it is the most critical corner on this circuit. So getting an appropriate drag off that corner is absolutely crucial to your lap time here.
Yeah, it's very, very, very crucial. It's a bit of a toss-up, actually, at least personally for me, between turn 1 and getting the braking point right for turn 1 and the exit out of the hairpin. But certainly in race situation, you want to have that exit off the hairpin, otherwise you're just going to be a sitting duck into the penultimate corner.
Hans, 6 minutes to go here in a qualifying session. Who have you got your eye on? Who's impressing you so far? Who's punching above their weight? Who's someone that you think needs to be a bit further up the order?
Hathaway's looking pretty good. He's in 5th or 6th at the moment. On live races, it's displaying as 5th, but now he's just fallen down to 6th. Actually, Colin Warwick has pipped him, and that's why Colin Warwick is in 5th, and live races obviously has lost connection. So we're looking at the Automobilista screen now, and his times are pretty respectable. He's less than a second off Kurt Stenberg's time, and Kurt Stenberg is pretty much about 0.3 of a second ahead of Will Devenish. So he's I guess it's like a case of best of the rest at the moment, but Mitch Hathaway, he's not that far away, and he's looking to capitalise, and we have seen Hathaway, he does put on some pretty good races. I would say he's a better racer than he is a qualifier, and we did see that at the opening race last year at Adelaide, and we've also seen it lately at the Albert Park Circuit. Oh, he's going to get some trouble here, and that's Devenish. Oh, he's just gone off at the hairpin, and he was actually up on his PB, so bit of a disaster there for Hathaway. And we're looking at Brendan Ross now. So Brendan Ross back as a full-time fixture in the series, which is good to see. And he's driving one of the PBF Pro-Am cars, I believe, for Bundaberg Red Racing.
Yeah, he was also a victim of the daylight savings time as well. Of course, being a Queenslander, the daylight savings for them does not apply. So he was actually an hour behind the rest of most of Australia. Of course, the only other state that doesn't do the daylight saving is WA, so they were, of course, disadvantaged as well. But now that everybody's back on the usual time mark, this is good for Brendan Ross. It's good to get to see him in action. Bit of a lock-up going there into the hairpin. And he's doing pretty well. He's inside the top 10, which is where he would like to be. I'm looking a bit further down the order here, Hans. There are some pretty notable people that are punching above their weight inside the top 10. If you look a bit further, Lion Mitch, of course, the first of the wildcards up there in P7's doing pretty well. There's another young gun here, Liam Spencer. So he's himself and Wayne Spencer have come across from Super 2. They've run just about everything in the last couple of weeks. So Liam Spencer's jumped into the Aaron Thomas ZB Commodore for CRE Motorsport. Aaron Thomas having some foot problems, actually. I think he's broken his foot, correct me if I'm wrong there, Lewis, hasn't he?
Yeah, I did see that. I think Will sent a message out in the group chat that he'd broken his foot. And the fact he was able to drive GT3 on Tuesday is a fair effort. So I think he is on the mend. So hopefully he's back racing soon. But a bit of a shame that he's having to sit this one out.
Pretty handy substitute, though, in Liam Spencer. Young gun, definitely got some pace. In actual fact, he outpaced his father on a couple of occasions, which he's doing right now.
Certainly is. And the Super 2 round here, obviously his father wasn't racing, even though in-game it was called Wayne. It was actually Liam driving. He managed to get a win in the Super 2 round here at Symmons Plains, although that was on the alternate version of Symmons Plains. So he has got a little bit of form around this circuit, albeit a slightly different version of it.
He certainly does. His father currently at the moment has just moved up to P16. I'm looking down the field here. We look at our live races timing just to see who I think is probably out of position. I think probably Zach Ross is somebody that I'd like to be expecting to do a little bit better than his current time or position of P15, Hans.
Yeah, I'd second that. I'd say probably BDS as well. He would like to be further up. So, they're both in a Loose Sim Sport affiliated team. So we got Team HDS at Loose Sim Sport, and then Loose Sim Sport itself. And Zach Ross, he's well down the order. And Peter is, he's not that far ahead. So Peter's firmly in the top 10 at the moment in ninth. But BDS, he wants to get up to into the top 10, and so too Zach Ross. So maybe it's looking a bit different, because we perhaps didn't expect Brendan Ross to be as far up as he is. But perhaps this new version of Symmons plane is actually quite suiting him pretty well at the moment.
Yeah, and Brendan Ross has actually moved up into P6 while we've been talking as well. So he was 8th the last time we checked in. He's now P6. So that's a very, very handy result for Brendan Ross. Of course, he's now moved out of the FCR Motorsport stable. He's a part of the PBF satellite team as well, the PBF Bundaberg Racing, along with D2 Davies, Dwayne Davies. Let's go back and have a look at our current leader on the standings, which is Kurt Stenberg. Now, Bretton Foley's moved ahead of Will Devonish here, which is very, very important for our defending champ. We have a little feature piece on him when we get to the team's points and the driver's points to talk about with Bretton Foley. Stenberg's on a bit of a slow lap at the moment, so he's just gearing himself up, as he probably got a track cut there. Didn't register a time, so he's been off the road somewhere. He'll get 2 more bites at the cherry. If you want to get another lap, you've got to get out now, and I think majority of the field hands is currently on the circuit. There's only probably about 5 or 6 guys that are currently parked up.
Yeah, Symmons Plains being a 2.4 kilometre long circuit, it's actually very difficult for 24 cars to all find their own bit of real estate and actually be able to set a qualifying time. And you might see Kurt Stenberg at the moment, or some of the other top runners like Brenton Foley or Will Devonish, they're running into slower cars that further down the grid. But they are also on.
Whoa! What was that?
Massive off.
That was a big off for Steve Burko. Where's he on the list? That was an absolute high-speed catastrophe for Burko. What on earth happened there? We've got to have a bit of a look at that.
If that fence wasn't there, it would end up in Launceston.
I reckon he would have been further than Launceston. What happened here? Did he just completely miss his braking marker, or what happened?
Let's have a look. Oh, he's on the grass. He's got 2 wheels on the grass, and the second he puts his foot on the pedal, there's absolutely no brake force being provided by those inner wheels that are ended up on the grass. So a very high speed off for Burko. So not ideal. He needs to get on the horse pretty quickly. And he won't get another lap in. So these are going to be the final laps now. And Boki probably won't get another lap, but he's about 3/10 up on his PB.
We've got Will Devonish up in the first sector as well. So up on his PB by 1/10, and he's just a smidge faster than Stenberg in the first sector.
Well, let's just stay with Phil Boak for the moment, because the checkered flag is out. That moves into P4. That's a really handy move for Phil Boak. So up into P4, sharing a row with Devonish at the minute, which we'll go to right now. Geez, he's not far away from Stenberg here. Rutledge does the right thing, gets off the road. There's clear track for Devonish at the moment. Pretty clean through turn 6. Turn 7's the tricky one, because you just got to feather the throttle slightly. The front end's just twitching away a little bit. Take the straight run to the line. Goes to P2. Lost a lot of time in sector 3 though, the very, very short sector 3. But most importantly, onto the front row for Will Devonish. So that's a good result. Who else is out there on track at the moment? I think there's a couple of drivers still completing some laps.
Liam Spencer was about to complete a lap, but he's just come in. He's aborted that. So we just saw him into the pits there.
Yeah, there he is,
and,
on bottom of the screen.
That's all over and out for Liam Spencer. And I think that's everyone. So everyone has come across the line. They've completed their last flying laps. And another pole goes the way of Kurt Stenberg. A very gallant effort, a fantastic effort. 51.21, about 0.2 of a second up, or a quarter of a second rather, up on Will Devonish.
Yeah, Will gave him a bit of a run there late, didn't he, Lewis? He ended up, it was, as you said, he was very, very close to the markers in the first 2 sectors, but he dropped about 1.5 in sector 3, which is extremely short sector 3. It's basically the last 2 corners. But nonetheless, he's on the front row, which is good. Being toward the pointy end of the grid here is massively important.
Yeah, you don't really want to be pretty much anywhere from the 3rd row back, because it is very, very difficult. The first, obviously, section of corners, I guess the right-hand kink probably doesn't count as a corner, but just trying to get through there through turn 1 and 2, and then the run to the hairpin, you don't want to be in that sort of mid-pack area. So to get yourself onto the front row helps quite a lot. Now it's up to him not to bowl the start.
There, that's the key part, isn't it? You've got to get off the line cleanly here, and we'll get a very, very good view of that thanks to our new trackside cameras as well. Well, speaking of getting a good view of this circuit, it's time for our community hot lap segment that we've introduced here for the Supercars Championship for 2020. We've had Will Devonish pilot around Adelaide. We've had Mitch Hathaway pilot his Ford around Albert Park. Now it's time for, you guessed it, the flat plane crank sound of a Volvo S60. So it's over to Steve Burko and his BP Ultimate Volvo S60.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Stephen Burko, and I'm here with the Automobilista Australia Hot Lap around Symmons Plains. I'll be driving the Volvo S60, and so as we begin, you're going to want a good exit out of the last corner and try not to get any wheel spin. And we start the lap. Now, coming into the first corner, you will go under heavy braking. You want to watch the brake locks through there. Coming out of that corner, there's a bit of wheel spin on the exit of turn 3, so you've got to be careful about that. Coming up to the hairpin now, there's great opportunity to overtake through here. Heavy braking markers, people will probably do it at the 100 metre board. But coming through there, onto the back straight now, again, this will probably see most of the action take place here. And it's a nice long straight with a little bit of a right kink at the end of it, and then heavy brakes into the second last corner. You want to brake it down to about second gear, coming through there, taking all the road on the inside and exit curbs, and trying not to get wheel spin onto the last corner, onto the straight, and that's a lap of Symmons Plains. Hope you guys enjoy, and hope to see you guys at the race.
Big thanks to Steve Burko there for his insights into this little paperclip of a circuit, or little bullring as we like to call it, the 2.415 kilometre, 7-turn Symmons Plains Raceway. Hans, it's an action-packed track, and it goes really, really quick. Even though it's 38 laps tonight, 2 38-lap distances, they're going to go in the blink of an eye.
A very short lap distance, only 2.4 Ks. We're about that 51 seconds mark. And the issue here is that coming out of the first chicane almost, so you go right, then you go left, a very tight left, and you go through this sort of S-bend coming onto the first of the straights into the hairpin turn. And what you may see is cars moving over on each other, and they end up like a pinball. They end up going back and forth. We've seen it in AMS Oz. We've also seen it in real life as well. And thankfully, we don't need to worry about damage here. We just reset and off we go again. But it is a bit of a car crash at this one in the opening laps, and it's just about finding your own space. But also, like Lewis has alluded to earlier, if you're from the third row back, it's very difficult to make passes and get ahead here because there's just so little room to pass. Then you come out of the hairpin and you're going on this curve straight. So it's very important that you pick your braking marker just right going into turn number 5, I believe it is, coming with the first left-hander back onto the main straight. And you're just putting a lot of load on the right rear tyre just coming onto the main straight. Also important to note that we'll see a lot of people when they pit, they'll go a lap down. And it could be a bit of a problem for them that if they go a lap down, it's going to be very hard for them to actually get that lap back.
Yeah, that's a very, very key point because it's a very slow pit lane. It's 40 k per hour pit lane. You've got your transit time. You've got your stop time as well. That you're absolutely right. You will see people go a lap down, and it's going to take a little bit of time depending on where all the pit stop strategy plays out, who comes in first and who comes in last, as to when the whole field gets cleansed and when we actually get a really true indication of where everybody is, because we'll be having to keep an eye out for who's already stopped and the kind of lap times they're doing, whether they come out into traffic or what have you. And by the time we eventually get everybody stopped, then we'll know what the running order is going to be. So it'll take quite a bit of time to figure that out. Of course, you can see down there your qualifying and race records, which of course are on the old layout, the layout that's there on the highlights graphics on the right of the screen there for you. So those records have not been broken as a result of tonight, but we're going to have a bit of a look and see whether or not we actually need to class them as a brand new track record or not, given we have a different version of the circuit. Lewis, let's take a look at the point standings coming into tonight's proceedings. So, top 12 on your screen now. The man we've all been talking about, well, he's perfect through the opening 3 races of the season.
Yeah, he's been a step above and certainly made it very, very difficult for Devonish, who has to be said, he stepped up his game massively from pretty much the second point or halfway point of last season to even the start of this season. But this season, he's taken up another notch and he still can't quite catch Stenberg. So that's why obviously Devonish is now in second place in the standings. And it has to be said, he's been better than Foley and the rest of the field. So it seems to be Stenberg and Devonish sort of out on their own in 1 and 2. But behind that, Foley again showing his quality. And then we have Mitch Hathaway in 4th place, who's just been really, really consistent. Bit unlucky at Albert Park, but still, he's been really consistent, put in some good, strong drives. But for me, Turmo in P5 and Rutledge in P6, they're probably they have to be the surprise package of the season, just in terms of where they are in the championship standings, with both equal on 342 as well. So that just is a testament to sticking it out there. They might not have the ultimate pace week in, week out, but they're always there to pick up a good result.
Spot on. Then we'll have a little piece just on the next page as well about the CRE team as well. But they are doing very, very well, being under the tutelage of Will Devonish and, of course, Aaron Thomas when he was in that group as well. Hans, we take a look at Brenton Foley on the right-hand side here, and you can see what his stats were last year. 13 poles, 9 race wins, and 6 other podiums outside of the victories. But we're only 3 rounds in, so keep that in mind. We're only 3 rounds in, but donuts in all 3 categories. But yet, he's still 3rd overall in the standings and still plenty of time to go.
Brenton Foley has been quite consistent this year, but it's just a matter of being best of the rest in terms of his own performances, because Thomas McMillan at Albert Park was better than him, and we've seen Will Devonish come to the fore this year in the supercar category, and also the arrival of Kurt Stenberg. So I think and I've remarked on this in the GT3 race, we see Brenton Foley perhaps not struggling in terms of his finishing down the order, but the efforts he has to put in to actually gain position and to actually sort of undo what he would have been used to, like in terms of starting higher up in the grid. But he's starting further back, and he just needs to be able to fight his way forward. He's done that pretty well so far, but unfortunately, he's just not getting the results that he would like, because we're just seeing the competition move forward.
Indeed, and he's going to have to step his game up. He's in a pretty good position tonight, being off a 2nd row of the grid, so we'll be looking to see if he can pick up a couple of podiums tonight as well. Let's go and have a look at the team's point standings, because as Lewis alluded to, the CRE Race Engineering guys, which there's actually 2 teams in that group, so CRE Race Engineering and the CRE Motorsport. Now, Turmo and Cam Rutledge are in the CRE Motorsport crew, then normally it's Aaron Thomas and Will Devonish in CRE Race Engineering. Of course, Liam Spencer is now in that car for the night's proceedings, but those teams are both in the top 4. Last year, when it was just Will Devonish and Cam Rutledge, they actually came together a little bit later on in the season. And probably about the 1/3 distance mark, they decided to join forces. Will was actually in the VF Commodore, switched to the ZB to join Cam, and they actually turned it on pretty well. They ended up with 3 race wins, as you can see there on your screen, and they also ended up with 10 podiums overall, and they were 2nd overall in the team's points behind eventual winners PBFs. The top 3 last year were actually PBF Race Engineering, then the CRE Motorsport guys, and then the HDS team, which of course is now Lou Simsport Team HDS. And look at that, all 3 of them currently in the top 3 on the standings, Lewis.
Yeah, there's nothing to separate, and they've all had all teams have really had up and down rounds in the first sort of three rounds, with obviously Adelaide just being the one race. But Albert Park, we did see some drivers in one race struggle, and then in the next race they're really, really strong. And that goes for pretty much every driver. Every driver outside of Devonish and Stenberg has had a really, really strong race, and they've pretty much followed up with they've laid an egg or binned it. So very, very close, and I reckon the top 4 could morph into a top 5. I think Loose Simsport, obviously not to be a little bit biased or anything, but trying to take the bias goggles off, I still think we'll see Loose Simsport move up. And if we see someone join Trans-Tasman Racing, we could see 6 teams, I should say, battling it out for the top step of the team's championship.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that there very possibly could be a 5-way fight. You can see it's actually not that much in it between the top 4. So 717 points, the leaders, CRE Race Engineering, back to 684 with CRE Motorsport. It's not a huge amount of deficit. That's a couple of positions to one driver in a race such as tonight, which could be very, very important. And Trans-Tasman Racing, well, of course, that's just a solo effort at the moment from Kurt Stenberg. Those 600 points from his 3 race victories is pretty much keeping him at the top of the standings. And as you just said too, Loose Simsport have had their fair share of drama in the opening couple of races, with internet disconnects and teammates running into each other and running off the road and things like that. So what could have been, they could be very much fighting for some points as well. But the most important thing is there's still a long way to go in this season. We're only up to round 3. Of course, with the sprint racing, we have 2 races per night, 150 points apiece for the race winners. And that, of course, goes into the team standings as well, which is precisely where we're about to head, because we are not too far away from getting a race start here for the first race of tonight's proceedings. So this is races 4 and 5 of the championship. And you can see from our perched position above the pit lane, there is already a little bit of pit lane practice starting to happen here, Hans. As we said, very, very important in a compulsory pit stop race.
Absolutely, and being with a short lap, it just makes it even more important. Being able to get a good run into pit lane and out of pit lane. There's a lot of time that can be made, and we're talking seconds here. We're talking maybe 1 or 2 seconds, and that could be the difference between going a lap down or passing another car, or losing position. So the importance of that is that you have to be 100% on the way into pit lane and on the way out of pit lane. It's not really a rest period anymore. So it just shows the importance, and especially with the top maybe 2 rows are separated by less than a second. It's very important that they're able to get onto pit lane cleanly and get off pit lane cleanly as well.
And Lewis, we saw this here in the Super 2 as well, that you only gain in very, very minor amounts of time when you're actually on the track. The pit lane adds a whole different dynamic to the Supercars Championship this year.
Yeah, with the longer pit stop times and proper fuel fill rate, it's as well as the every track now having 40 kilometers an hour. Obviously, last year and in previous seasons, we've had it where we just accepted what the track gave us with the pit lane speeds, but now all circuits are at 40 kilometers an hour. So drivers will go a lap down here. That said, as was alluded to, you can make up time, obviously being really aggressive on the way into the pits, and the outlaps are going to be crucial if you're trying to undercut somebody, because they're going to be the best times to get by people the easiest, because passing on the circuit here, it will cost you time to pass somebody, and it will cost you time being stuck behind somebody. So the easiest way you can pass somebody is in the pits with actually taking on less fuel and attacking the pit lane entry and not losing any time there.
Yeah, when you attack that pit lane entry, you've got to be very, very careful. The line comes up extremely quickly. It's actually not a bad pit entrance to deal with here. As we take our camera, and you can actually see when we zoom in over there, you can actually see that there's the pit lane entry. Oop, as the game is just playing a little bit of funny buggers right now. The pit lane entry, there it is at the far side there. You can see it comes in off of turn 6, right around the back, just in front there of the Coates Hire and Tasmania signs, and the Outwell Broadcasting sign, of course. The line does come up very quickly. It's just behind that the curve in the tyre bundle there at the end of pit lane, just in front of the Outwell Broadcasting sign. So it's a very high speed entrance. You've got to get your braking done very quickly. There's plenty of room to do it. So as Lewis said, you attack that line, and you've got to get it down to 40 k's very quickly. There's a little bit of tolerance. I think it's like maybe 2 or 3k tolerance, but if you're caught too much further beyond that tolerance, you will end up with a slam dunk drive-through penalty, which will sting you at a circuit like this. Now, we've just had the server restart a couple of times. I'm wondering if there's a bit of a struggle with getting a few people back into the game. We'll just step away from live pictures for just a moment while we figure out what's going on. Gents, let's talk about the championship in general this year. Of course, there's on the calendar, let's bring it up for you. Supercars calendar, there it is. We're up to round 3 of 15. Bit of a different dynamic this year. There's some circuits in there that we would normally not do. We have, of course, last year followed the Supercars calendar in real life, substituting some tracks for tracks that we didn't actually have a copy of at the time. So back then, we didn't have the bend, so we put Calder Park in there, but Calder's been retained for this year. And Lewis, a couple of really interesting ones we're looking forward to going to, especially when it gets to our second trip to New Zealand.
Yeah, the Hamilton Street Circuit. Obviously put a bit of work into that one. It's come up a treat. And that back chicane is going to be very, very interesting, especially on the first lap there. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Another street circuit. And as we've seen in real life and in the sim world, street circuits, you can have some funny results and some great racing. So can't wait to go there. And obviously we do go to the Bend as well for the first time in the Supercars Championship, which will host the final round of the championship, which will be very, very interesting. As from what I've heard from a lot of the drivers, some people don't mind it. And it's also a lot of drivers that absolutely hate the track. So it'll be very, very interesting by the end of the season.
Hans, the one I'm looking forward to the most on this calendar, as we're just waiting for the grid to grid up again, is actually the Phillip Island 250.
Yeah, Phillip Island, a fantastic driver's circuit. It's just it's a track that you've got to be fast and flowing at, and you've just been every corner leads out of one corner into another, and there's just the car is doing so much turning, and it's important to have a good balance at Phillip Island. Great circuit to watch racing and a great circuit to drive at. Now we're looking at the grid for race 1 this evening. Kurt Stenberg, fantastic effort. He's got a 51.2 for the pole lap, and he's about 2/10 ahead of Will Devenish. I was just trying to retain the name in my head. Will Devenish, he's about 2/10 behind off the pole lap, and he's come up in 2nd place. Then an all PBF 2nd row, that's Brenton Foley in 3rd and Phil Boak in 4th. Phil Boak, good to see a bit of a return to form from him, because we haven't seen him up the order that much this season so far. So good to see him up there. Scott Nolan, we've seen him, actually at Adelaide he did a really good performance. He tried to pass Brenton Foley, he got past, and then he couldn't pass him, and then he got past him again. So very interesting to see Nolan. He's a pretty good driver. And Colin Warwick is in the guest car that's usually occupied by, actually, well, he signed up to drive this car, but then it was occupied by Thomas McMillan. So McMillan's been keeping the seat warm for Warwick. Peter in the Loose SimSport Logitech car. So good to see Peter up in the top 10. He's a pretty solid driver, and on occasion he does get up the order quite a bit. Then in 8th place, Brendan Ross. Good to see him back after the whole debacle with Australian Daylight Savings Time, and he's in the PBF satellite team for Bundaberg Red Racing. In 9th place, Mitch Hathaway, who's leading his teammate, BDS, Billy Dougal-Salonga, in 10th. Oh, I apologise, it's actually Lime Mitch in 10th, and the Super 2 Championship leader. Then Termo in 11th, and 12th should be BDS, so BDS has ended up a bit further up the order, and then in 13th will be Liam Spencer in 13th. I just couldn't control the screen for a second. So Liam Spencer in 13th place, a pretty good showing from him. He's in Aaron Thomas's usual car. Then we've got Burko, Cam Rutledge, Zach Ross, Wayne, who's actually in Jono S's car. Then Dwayne Davies in the Holden product. Caelan Duncan, Brian Walsh, good to see his return. Luke Joyner, another one of the Super 2 guys. Scott Stancliffe, and the rear of the grid, Brody in the PBF Great Northern Racing car, and Glenn Miles is in 24th place. Good to see a full complement of Scuderia Alitalia cars as well.
Have a look at this, Lewis. Will Devenish has already got the car angled towards Kurt Stenberg on the race here. We're about to go racing on the Apple Isle. Let's go for 38 laps. Away we go. Stenberg got a good launch, but it was Devenish who lit the rear tyres up and lost a lot of ground, but he's going to be able to maintain place for the moment. What's it look like through turn 1? It looks like it's pretty clean back there. Everybody's managed to get through. Already Colin Warwick harassing the back of the first of the PBF cars in Phil Boak. Devenish now trying to put Stenberg under some pressure, but it's all clean sailing at the moment as they head around the hairpin for the first time.
Oh, we've got Warwick around.
Warwick's around.
I think he got a little nudge, but he was a little bit sideways. I did notice through the exit of turn 1 that both the PBF cars had a little bit of contact between each other, but they've sorted themselves out. Obviously, Stenberg, a little bit of a gap over Devenish, and they've got a little bit of a gap over Foley and Boak, who themselves have got a gap now over Nolan, who's under a bit of pressure from Peter, and then Ross, Mitch Hathaway.
Sorry to cut you off there, Lewis. Just actually seeing what happened to Colin Warwick. He tried to take the high line through the hairpin, and he actually looped it a little bit himself. And as he was going around, he did get a helping hand from Scott Nolan, who was on the inside. So I think that one's unfortunately going to be entirely on Colin Warwick. And actually after getting a good launch up to 5th place, as you said, you make a mistake here, you get absolutely poleaxed on the penalties, and now he's down in 21st place.
Had by Mitch at turn 1 get a bit sideways. He dropped a couple of spots. Had Billy now trying to go around the outside of him at the hairpin, but yeah, Mitch just a little bit sideways under braking at turn 1, and he's now dropped behind Termo and Mitch Hathaway.
Hans, a little bit of chaos at the hairpin already. A couple of cars starting to get into each other, but not too bad on the opening couple of laps. And we're just watching one of the lower end of the mid-pack order here. D2 Davies, Luke Joyner, Scott Stancliffe all in there. Actually getting into the back of Cam Rutledge down there. Pretty clean pass through there, but it's not too bad this racing so far. This is better than what we probably expected. We thought it was going to be a little bit worse than this in the opening couple of laps.
Yeah, we've only got one DNF so far, so that's Glenn Miles, but Yeah, not too many DNFs that we've seen on screen at the moment, so it's actually quite a clean run through the hairpin turn. And Phil Boak, incidentally, is looking quite racy on his teammate, and Will Devenish is actually looking quite racy as well on Stenberg. So these two cars, they're paired up together, all Holdens, 2 ZBs and 2 VF Commodores. And the top 4 cars, they're pretty much going at it hammer and tong. And Steve Burko as well, he's looking pretty racy on one of the CRE cars. That's Turmo who's trying to make a move on. But he's not quite up far enough, so he wasn't able to make that stick when the moment counted. And you can see Peter in the background. Sorry, not Peter. Is it Peter? Oh, sorry, Wayne. Yeah, it's actually Wayne. Wayne, who's in John O'S's car.
Now on top of that, Wayne Spence has actually managed to move himself ahead of his son Liam Spencer here too. Burko's around. Burko goes around, does a full pirouette 360, but didn't quite get away with it. Now he probably looks like he did that all on his own as well. Maybe just got a little bit hung up on that curb. He'll take the motorbike part of the circuit.
Sorry, Steve, I've got to cut you off because there's a race happening at the top end of the field. Will Devenish is on the outside, going around turn 5 on Kurt Stenberg.
Well, he must have got a very, very good run out of the hairpin because he's gone the long way around and he's going to take it. He's just going to drive it straight down the middle of the road, but he's going to leave enough of a margin for Stenny to stick his nose up the inside here at the second to last corner, turn 6. And Will's going to be the loser out of that one. He'll try and hang it around the outside. A bit of a touch of panels. Will's on the wrong side of the circuit here. Of course, most of the corners go to the left. So Will's going to have to really fight hard to hang on to it here. This is now allowing Brenton Foley to get into the battle, and so too Boak. Oh, there was a coat of paint between Stenberg and the fence there, Lewis.
Yeah, absolutely nothing between those guys. I had a look at the replay going all the way back to see why they'd closed up as they go once again side by side. Bit of contact at the hairpin. I went all the way back to see what happened, and it looked like Stenberg had a little bit of a moment in the braking zone at turn 1, and that allowed obviously Will to get that run all the way to the hairpin on the previous lap, and now, as you can see, nothing between them.
There's a nice little train starting to form behind these two as well. So you've got Stenberg and Devenish, then you've got Foley, Boak, Scott Nolan starting to come into frame too. So too is Pete Savage for the Loose Sim Sport team. You can see him just in there. Brennan Ross and Mitch Hathaway. So they're all the 8 cars you can just see on your screen just then, just for a very brief moment. So any one of these drivers that trips over themselves at the front of the pack, it's going to immediately promote them into the little gap that's between Mitch Hathaway and his teammate BDS. So that's down to 8th and 9th. So it'll be a costly penalty if you make a mistake, if you put a foot wrong in the next little bit. There's a late move. Devenish goes down to the apex. He's going to try and get the drive off here. Pretty even drive off this hairpin here, Hans.
Yeah, it just shows that they've got the setup of the cars just right to get off the hairpin corner. The car just squats and off you go. So Stenberg is he's not going to cede position right now, but Will Devenish is looking pretty racy. Oh, he's made the late move. Oh, a bit of side-to-side contact there, and Stenberg has to yield forcibly, and that opens him up to attack from Brent Foley. And now Foley, we're going to see him potentially up into second place. We'll stay with this battle because it's quite entertaining. And Stenberg, he's just able to hang tough around the outside. It's probably not so good in the long run, and he just cedes position now. So 2 positions back for Kurt Stenberg, and they're just watching Will Devenish. He's starting to run away. Scott Nolan, incidentally, he's one of the faster cars on the track. The fastest 2 cars on the track are Scott Nolan and Pete Savage. And Nolan is looking very, very racy, and I say this too much actually, on the back of Phil Boak. So that's probably going to make its way onto Brunswick Bingo.
I think it will. That's a little something that you've just spoiled the surprise on. A little something to come a bit later on in the year, Brunswick Bingo. So we'll reveal some more details about that a bit later on. But you're right, Stenberg probably feels like he was getting mugged in that opening stance. There's another bit of side-to-side contact. Yeah, Boak got a bit of a nudge from Nolan as Boak went a bit wide there, I think, didn't he, Lewis? And look at this, right on the back of him immediately is Pete Savage.
Yeah, he just outbroke himself a little bit at the penultimate corner there, and Nolan wasn't going to help him get back onto the track.
No, definitely not. Scott, there was a bit of banter in the chat saying, is anyone going to give a setup?
And there's a Scuderia Alitalia car in the fence. I think that's Brian Walsh, the sole remaining car.
You're right there, Hans. That can only be Brian Walsh. He's around. So that's a yellow flag that's out there now. Boak just escorts.
Nolan.
Yeah.
He was about to go into the tyre wall.
He just got escorted a little bit wide then by Boak. It was very, very sneaky. Boak just opened the steering a little bit just to gain a little bit of an advantage there, I think, at the hairpin as he made that move, just to make sure that there wasn't anything to fight there. It was all fair. But you're right, Nolan was very much heading for the tyre wall there. Boak outbrakes himself for the second time, but so too does Nolan. Oh, Nolan's nearly gone around, and there's just not enough room for that for that loose sim sport Ford FGX Falcon to sneak through, Lewis.
Nah, just not enough room, and that's the big problem with this circuit. If someone does make a little bit of a mistake, if it's at the wrong point like it is there, you can't make them pay because there's a corner immediately after it, and then it's a really short straight and an awkward run into turn 1. Just another thought, a little bit further ahead, after now that Foley's moved his way up into second place, I reckon that is a dream scenario for Devonish, because he was just around about the pace of Stenberg, if not just a little bit slower. But Stenberg has been the pace setter in practice and in qualifying. With Foley in second now, it will hold Stenberg up and will allow Devonish to build a little bit of a lead. So he's got his work cut out for him, does Stenberg, if he wants to obviously claim 4 from 4.
Hans, we were talking a bit earlier in the broadcast about the fact that you can take multiple lines through that hairpin. Scott Nolan just exercised the high line to absolute maximum benefit there. He took the high line, ran the hairpin, got very, very good drive off, and actually pulled about a car length or two on Pete Savage by the time they got the braking zone at turn 6.
Yeah, absolutely right. Just shows the calibre of guys like Scott Nolan and other ASC guys that they're managing to drive through. And there's a bit of a race going on between Foley and Stenberg. And Stenberg goes the high line as if he was doing the Scott Nolan line, and he's getting some pretty good drive. He's in the toe, and they're coming through the curve straight, turn 5.
He's managed that absolutely beautifully. I think Foley did the boat line, just escorted him a little bit wide, unfortunately to his detriment, because under brakes, here comes the number 47, tail hanging out. That's what Foley likes to do. Foley trying the over and under here, but as we said before, not enough room to affect that pass. You need a little bit more room, and you need your opponent to be a lot wider. So that now releases Stenberg after about 3 or 4 laps behind the number 1 VF Commodore of Brenton Foley. What can he do about hunting down Devonish? He's got a nice little margin, 2.2 seconds. It actually seems like a lot here, given that, as we said, you only gain in 1 or 2 tenths a lap. What Stenberg got in store here? Can Foley go with him?
Well, it will be to Foley's benefit if he can stick with him, because strategically he'll be able to see all of Stenberg's lines and he'll try and work that to his benefit. But Foley, he's got his own way of operating the VF Commodore, and he'll try to use that to his maximum advantage. We often make reference down here to block passing, because a lot of the braking zones are sort of curved in relation to the actual circuit. Now, we've seen that both the PBF guys, was that a block pass, or was that perhaps a bit more with the, escorting the cars wide?
I'm not 100% sure. What's your thoughts on that one there, Lewis?
Well, I didn't actually get a good view of what they did, but I don't think that was not so much a block pass. I think that's a bit more of a harsh word, but they're making the move, but they're not making it easy for the guy to get a switch back on, which obviously we did see Foley try and do on the last lap there after Stenberg got by. But no, I think it's okay as long as you're not sort of escorting anybody into any barriers or off the circuit.
I think on screen right now, Ross and Hathaway in that battle, they've illustrated it perfectly, that you'll end up down the inside of the circuit, and just by braking, you have to brake the car straight for maximum efficiency. You end up all the way high and wide just to get that good run in. So that's why the block pass works so well down at the hairpin.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to execute a block pass as well. One of the best circuits, I think, to do it, we saw this in TCR a couple of times, is up the inside into turn number 11 at Winton, where you've got that one of those drags out of the straight, and you can get that run up the inside. You can just park your car nicely on the apex, arrest the person's momentum behind you, and then just carry out to the normal racing line of the circuit. And that's the perfect execution of the block pass, because it means that the momentum from the person behind, they cannot follow through on that over and under type treatment. As there's a bit of an accident down here at the hairpin, we just heard something go off.
It's Nolan. Nolan's off. He's down in 8th. We've also got another car I thought I saw go down the field, but I think it was just time. But yeah, Nolan off the road at the hairpin.
Let's have a bit of a look at this one here. So he was tucked in behind Phil Boak, and then Pete Savage was tucked in behind him. So what happened here? Nolan's gone out to look for a pass, just on the brakes a fraction too late. So he's gone round it, and yep, that's what it was. So he's actually hit the barrier as he's trying to do a U-bolt on the gravel trap there. Looks like he might have just gotten away with it. He's come on next door to Billy Dougall's Salonga.
Billy would have gotten a hell of a surprise when he was coming out of the corner, and now he's in for his first pit stop, only pit stop of the night.
Probably not a bad ploy, that, actually. You've had your off the track, so you've probably done some damage to the car, you've done some damage to the tyres, so why not go onto a contrary strategy to everybody else?
Yeah, I think it's a really good time to pit. Obviously, he's been battling hard out there. Obviously, that mistake would have dropped him down the field. But even for a number of these guys, it might be smart to sort of pull into the pits if you are racing with people. Just try and get in some clear air, put in some quick laps, and when the pit stops shake out, hopefully end up a spot or two higher. So for someone to say, Peter, he's right behind Phil Boak, or even Brendan Ross, who's been battling with Mitch Hathaway for pretty much the entire length of the race as well, might be an idea for him as well. That said, though, the way Ross has been driving, he might not want to last or try and make his tyres last, 23, 24 laps.
I'd second that emotion for one of the men at the back of this battle, and in Steve Burko, who qualified pretty poorly a bit further down the field. He's stuck behind two of the newcomers running wildcards this round. So Caelan Duncan in the Kelly Racing Nissan Motorsport 2017 car, and then ahead of him Scott Stancliffe in the Erebus Ash Walsh car.
So Ross off at the hairpin. He's made a mistake.
So Zach Ross or Brendan Ross?
Brendan Ross, sorry.
All right, so
yeah, Brendan Ross, he's down in 7th at the moment, so he's ceded position to Mitch Hathaway.
That's a big loss that he's made there as well. He was tucked right in there in that battle for 5th and 6th, and he's lost a lot of ground.
He didn't hit the barrier though. He's very, very close, but he was able to pull it up. So no damage, but certainly a lot of time loss.
Now with Scott Nolan removed from the equation behind Phil Boak, it's actually Pete Savage in the Loose Sim Sport FGX Falcon. He's actually harassing the back of the number 46 VF Commodore, or the 046 rather, it's styled as. And here we go. Now this is the move he's trying to make. Oh, he's locked the rears, and massive accident there in the sand trap. And Boak hasn't been affected by it too much, but there might be a bit of steering damage on board. We'll get a replay of that.
Yeah, I think we'll have to go and have a bit of a look on from Phil Boak's point of view just to see what precisely happened there. So there's Pete Savage. If we look up to Phil Boak, let's go on board on the bonnet cam, actually above the roof cam. Here it is here. So you see, entering stage left. There he goes.
Bang.
Bang. And off he goes. So only held up for a very brief moment. So pretty lucky there, I would say, Phil Boak.
That wasn't actually too bad. I was worried that it might have hit the front left wheel. So less likely of steering damage, but perhaps a bit of front spoiler damage on board for Phil Boak. But Phil Boak, he again escapes the clutches of another attacker, and yet there is another Loose Sim Sport HDS Falcon ranging up on him, and that's Mitch Hathaway.
Sure is. Mitch Hathaway's number 31 now looms into view, so Boak has lost out a little bit of time. It's put Hathaway onto his tail. Pete Savage has now come back into 6th place. Meanwhile, back up the front, you're looking at something here. Looks like Will Devenish has made a mistake here, Hans, because Kurt Stenberg is right with him.
I'm not sure where Will Devenish has made the mistake. Actually, would have been in the first sector on this lap. He's about, he's more than, nearly 1 second off the pace, and they're coming up to lap traffic right now. So that's Scott Stancliffe. He needs to get out of the way. And he bounces off the wall there. That's a bit of a worry. Oh, they nearly went sideways. And Stenberg is going to use this to his advantage. He's not quite far enough to make the block pass, but he's letting Devenish know that he's there. Oh, he gets the bump and run done. So was there a touch there? Perhaps not. Perhaps there was.
Well, there was a little bit of return serve from Will as they came out of the hairpin, so I'm wondering whether there was maybe a very, very gentle escort going into the hairpin there. It was very, very touch and go. Devenish was defending hard, and he's not going to be able to defend this, though. Stenberg sends it up the inside here. I'm wondering if there's a little bit of a bump and run. There's a little bit of a nudge. Devenish will send it up the inside here at 7, so just gave a little bit of a reserve on the exit just as Stenberg tried to execute a block pass.
Off. Sorry, there's a car in the pit lane.
I was about to say, you're not telling me there's a car off, there's a car in the pit lane.
No, I couldn't tell. Oh, they're off. They're going on here. Sorry, Lewis, I managed to cut you off, but Will Devenish and Kurt Stenberg, they're going at it, and the gloves are off between them.
And they've actually...
They're rubbing down the pit straight, so obviously they're not too happy with each other because they're rubbing all the way down from the hairpin onwards, and they're rubbing coming into turn 1, so these two not happy with each other.
No, certainly not, and you can actually just see in the background there, they have put Scott Nolan a lap down now, so he did come in, and he's actually only just behind this group, or this leading pair rather. So that's not too bad for Scott Nolan, given he's taken a stop very early, but he'll have some much, much more worn rubber than these guys come the end of the first race. Looking a bit further afield, Foley's all on his own in P3 at the moment. Boak is still getting harassed by Mitch Hathaway here, Hans. Actually, no, he hasn't, because Hathaway's gone into the lane.
So Hathaway's gone in the pit, so he wanted to get out of that battle.
So pit stops very, very slowly starting to unfold. Hathaway deciding to take it right on the halfway mark. 19 of 38 laps on the board. So it's not really a flurry of pit lane activity at the moment. It's just a trickle. So a lot of people going a little bit deeper into this race, wanting to have something to fight with when the going gets tough right at the very end of it all.
Got Davies in the pits as well, and Nolan's going to be the one to look out for when Hathaway leaves the pits. So they were near each other when obviously Nolan pitted, but it looks like Hathaway is going to clear him just.
Yep, he's going to clear him because Nolan's had some traffic. He's had traffic in the form of Scott Stancliffe, but he's going to get D2 Davies. And there's Scott Nolan, and there's Mitch Hathaway. So Hathaway comes out probably with about a 3/4 to 1 second advantage over Scott Nolan. So given his excursion off the road, that's not all that terrible. And I think a bit further afield, we just saw that, there's someone off at the corner. There's a move for the lead. Colin Warwick is actually off at the final corner as well, as we're cycling through to look for a move for the lead. So that was Stenberg making a move down at the hairpin on Devenish. I just caught the tail end of it, Lewis, you're right. These two are not going to be separated by very much by it gets the time it gets the checkered flag. Will they mirror each other in the stops?
It might be an idea for Stenberg to try and pit early and get a little bit of an undercut, because he's clearly getting held up by Devenish, and Devenish isn't making it easy to pass. And if he doesn't watch himself, he might find himself being undercut from Foley. But that said, Foley's continuing to go around out there.
Drive-through penalty for Billy Dougal-Salonga. We just got Hans trying to have a bit of a look to see what has happened to Colin Warwick, because he's parked at the outside of
He's
turn.
actually a DNF now.
It's the DNF now, so there we go. So he was parked at the outside of turn 7 for quite a while. Stenberg gets the job done finally at the hairpin and gets it done. I think that's pretty fair. Now, does Will return serve? There's a little bit of a gap left on the inside. Now Stenberg's going to allow him to have that room on the right-hand side and take the defensive approach down here into 6. Can he get the block pass on, or is Will going to just gently escort? Will's tried to do the same thing again to get that little bit of an overlap, and Will goes in. There he is. So decided, I'll go on a contrary strategy to you. We can't see him through the pit lane fence. It looks like there's another car back there as well coming in. There goes Billy Dougal-Salonga into the pit lane. So Devenish is in, Foley in, Rutledge
Pete
in,
Savage in as
Pete
well.
Savage in, and so too BDS. There goes Cam Rutledge, so he was a lap down. There's the number 9 Erebus car that's going out the pits. I think that's one of the guys that's the wild card. If I look a bit further down the order, just trying to see there, I think that's Luke Joyner. It's a very quick stop for Will Devenish. Now, where does he come out into this equation? He's actually come out behind BDS. So BDS is actually, well, he's a lap down right now. So too is Devenish actually a lap down, or where's he come out into this equation? He comes out just ahead of Steve Burko. So touch and go, that's not too bad for Will Devenish. He actually comes out in 6th place. The men ahead of him yet to stop. And Stenberg's now reacting. Phil Boak, really the next man we want to take a look at. Then Brendan Ross, Zach Ross and Liam Spencer also yet to stop as well. So let's cycle up. Here's Liam Spencer. In behind him, that is the car of D2 Davies, or Dwayne Davies. And then we've got Zach Ross just ahead as well. And then Brendan Ross is just a little bit further afield. So these guys are all going to start to take some stops.
Stenberg is on the move.
All right, so here comes Kurt Stenberg. Now, where's Will Devenish in this equation? So Stenberg is down to 4th place. Will Devenish coming around the final corner now. This will be very touch and go. I think it's going to be very tight at the hairpin. There's going to be traffic. Stenberg going to get the job done.
Devenish is going to get the run, though.
Devenish was going to get the run, but he was balked by Billy Dougal-Salonga. Now, Salonga has gone around Stenberg to stay currently on the lead lap, as far as I can gather. Devenish right with him, though, and he decides to give up the ghost here. So Devenish's got warm tyres. He hasn't been able to get that move done. The traffic has played a factor here.
Got the crisscross, though. He's going to try and have a stab at the penultimate corner, but Stenberg's just got a slightly better run. But once again, these two are going to be rubbing doors at the penultimate corner.
Yeah, they sure are. And it's just going to be escorted a little bit wide. And there was a little bit of a defensive move there, and then moving back to the line with Stenberg. And that's your one move you've got to allow it to happen. He's going to try the crisscross. So the crisscross again, as Devenish's got 2 wheels, just kicked up a little bit of dust. They're going to go crisscross again. As Devenish's going to have the inside for turn 1 and 2 here. Was he going to let it go? No, he lets it go. Tries to take a much better line and try and size the run out of this corner. But Stenberg positioned the car pretty well there.
He took a little bit too much curb, I thought, did Devonish, but he's still got a good run on the exit, and now, he's going to see the old crisscross at the hairpin, but it might be worth just trying to stick around the outside and get that better run.
Gone the crisscross again, though. Got a really good drive off. That's an excellent drive off, but just can't quite match it. He needs to be just a little bit further ahead. Needs to have maybe a front fender ahead.
He's in a better position this time. The question is, can he pull it up? He couldn't do it last lap. Can he do it this time?
Here we go. Traffic not a factor. Does get it done. Will hold Stenberg high and wide. Just lets him run those right-hand side tyres across the outside ripple strip at 6. And that's a much better execution there from Devonish that time around. So we'll have to keep that battle going. There's 13 laps remaining. They'll go hammer and tongs, as Hans has used my sayings, right to the finish.
Braking there as well. A little bit of contact as well. So Stenberg sticking with him. And once again, I think we're going to see this for a few laps here where these guys are just going to be crisscrossing throughout. We have seen Stenberg try that wider line, and he's going to try it again here. Will trying to do the same thing and block at the same time, and that's actually given him a decent exit. And Stenberg, because he was sort of balked and couldn't quite cross and turn in when he wanted, it has led Devonish to hold on into the penultimate corner this time.
There's a drive-through penalty that's come up from Brendan Ross. I think Hans is cycling through just to see. I think he potentially may have only just left the pit lane there, Hans.
He's just left the pit lane, so he's made a pit lane speeding infringement. Incidentally, Colin Warwick as well. He lost all drive coming out of the second last corner, and there was smoke behind the car, so I would hazard a guess that it's an engine failure.
Yeah, I think he's just gone one too many gears down for that final sequence of corners. So most of the pit sequence has happened now. The only man that has not stopped is this man here, Phil Boak, sporting a bit of damage on the front of the car, and as you can see, those tyres probably looking a bit second rate. Getting to the end of this fuel window, we did see before the broadcast began that you could probably get somewhere between, I think, 30 or 32 laps on a stint of fuel, Lewis, but tyres probably being the limiting factor.
Yeah, tyres will be the limiting factor, but it's not so much going to be about wear, it's going to be about temperature. Obviously, you will lose performance, particularly through the last corner. You'll get a bit of a slide on going, and that's where you'll lose the majority of the time. But it's not too big of an issue. If you have a straight enough car, and if you play around with the roll bars a little bit, you can get rid of that oversteer that you will get when the tyres start to go. So he's playing the longer game, and he's going to put in not too much fuel, and if there's a safety car at the end, he'll have some really, really good tyres to battle as well.
What sort of pit strategies have people gone for out there, do you think? Do you think drivers have gone for a higher tank of fuel and then taking less of a fill during the stop, or do you think they've actually gone maybe and sort of split it down the middle and take whatever fuel they need to take to get to their lap number?
Well, with the way these cars work, it doesn't really matter too much with the fuel. So what we've done with our drivers is just tank it at every opportunity, because taking a shorter pit stop with obviously less fuel, as you now see Stenberg into the lead, taking less fuel at the pit stops will save you a lot more time than, say, having half fuel and pitting it halfway and then putting half a tank in. So that's what you'll see throughout the majority of the field, I'd say.
Hans, you were frantically waving at this battle that was going on as Kurt Stenberg actually sets the fastest lap of the race on the lap that he just got past Will Devonish.
Yeah, he managed to get past Will Devonish at the final corner, or he managed to set it up, rather not at the final corner. He on the second last corner, he got past, but on the curve straight, coming into the second last corner, he did get a good run out of the hairpin, and that worked for him. He didn't go for the crisscross, he hung tough on the outside of the circuit, and he managed to get past through the curve straight section that they are at now. So Stenberg has managed to open up a gap already, so good speed aboard the TTR Commodore.
Yeah, he's been trying to get that crisscross going for a little while, but it hasn't been working for him, so he's gone with something a little bit different, and this time it's paid off. Will's not making it easy for him, though. He's going to stick with him, as Will now sets the fastest lap of the race, grabs a 10th off of Kurt Stenberg, so still plenty of speed aboard both these cars. 9 laps to run now. They both get, again, very close to that Armco barrier on the exit of 3.
Got Phil Boak leaving the pit, so he's just done his compulsory pit stop, and he's going to have Mitch Hathaway behind him, but he is going to stay in 4th place. And having a look as well, Mitch Hathaway and Scott Nolan have had a really long battle since the pit stops, and Peter's also joined onto the back of him.
Phil Boak's actually come out with a pretty handy advantage here over Mitch Hathaway as they get down to the hairpin. The Sector 1 split, we'll get a read now. It's 4.4 seconds, so we thought that he was starting to fade a little bit on that worn rubber. He was losing time to Stenberg and Devonish as they'd already stopped. But he's actually come out with pretty clear track ahead and pretty clear track behind as well.
Yeah, I think just staying out that little bit longer, he's been able to just put less fuel in, and that's where he's found all that time. And with the new fuel fill being accurately put into the game now, that's where you find a lot of time around this circuit. It's vital, as we see Nolan and Hathaway side by side, final corner once again.
Yeah, Scotty Nolan's recovering pretty well from his moment down at the hairpin and giving Mitch Hathaway a run for his money. That's despite the fact that Scott Nolan came in well and truly before Mitch Hathaway decided to take to the lane as well. Nolan's got a bit of a threat going on from Savage.
We've got to move on from the lead. We've got to move on from the lead. Dev is having a look at the inside at the penultimate corner again. He's got the job done, and Stenberg's going to have to try and stick it out around the outside.
And he leaves him plenty of space there, Will Devonish. He could have escorted him right out to the edge of the track limits, but Stenberg actually did that all by himself, just carried a lot of speed here. Sets the move up on the crisscross out of one. That's beautifully done.
Yeah, Will just outbroke himself just a little bit, and that opened the door for Stenberg, who has been racing for a very, very long time, very experienced, and saw the gap and took it.
Yeah, that's what you call an opportunistic move there. The gap just appeared miraculously out of nowhere, and seized it with both hands very, very quickly and said, I'll have that first position back. Thank you very much. Looking down the orders, we're going back to that battle actually for 5th, 6th and 7th place. Mitch Hathaway. Look at this. Mitch Hathaway having to fend off Nolan and Pete Savage. So Nolan ran the outside. Savage doesn't know which way to go.
Brody's in the fence up at the...
Oh, no!
Nolan has got him.
And Nolan's collected him. So we're going to cycle back. Let's see if we can pick up where Rhodey is in this. So he's down in 20th place. So I don't know what he's done there. He's probably done all this all by himself. In actual fact, the replay, he's been there for quite some time. We actually haven't got a read on what exactly happened to him. I'm not sure if he's buried in the fence or what he's doing. Maybe he was just staying there out of the way to try and let people go through. And then all of a sudden, whack.
Absolute disaster for Scott Nolan there. I think there's a lot of cars that they're having trouble getting into the hairpin, and Scott Nolan was one of them, and unfortunately he did manage to collect Rhodey. But Scott Nolan, it's a matter of swings and roundabouts for him, because he's got some pretty good pace, and unfortunately he hasn't been able to show it, as now Mitch Hathaway and Pete Savage are ahead of him. But he has it all to do once again after a pretty good strategy after that pretty dodgy lap that he had early in the race. And he did come in straight away, so considering he was losing time. New fastest lap of the race, 51.467 for Kurt Stenberg. So they're just going a 10th faster each fastest lap that they set.
Devonish is still hanging on there. He's 4 tenths in arrears. And this battle for 5th, 6th and 7th place I don't think is quite over yet. There's still another 5 or 7. Oh, there's someone around at the final corner. Who's that going around? Is that Cam Rutledge? It's one of the CRE Motorsport cars.
There's 2 cars. There's Turmo and I think Rutledge.
Oh, if that's the case, that's an absolute disaster. Yeah, it is. Rutledge and Turmo around. So, replay time. Let's have a bit of a look at him here. So, Rutledge was already off the circuit. He went off at 6. He was looking to rejoin and try and rejoin safely. Oh, and then just spun. Wow, look at that. Parting of the Red Seas for Caelan Duncan. The 2 cars came together and then they just all of a sudden vanished. It's just like Moses was there and just said, separate. And they went different directions.
And incidentally, Turmo has ended up just in the on the infield there. So one CRE car on the outfield and the other in the infield. And the problems continue for Turmo actually. So he's up at the hairpin. So he's probably got dodgy steering, bent steering on board.
It was a fair hit, but I have to say that I don't think you can get any luckier than Caelan right then. Because in that situation, you cannot brake or steer in either direction without running into those guys, so that's about as lucky as you can get. You should probably go out and buy a lotto ticket between races.
Oh, I think you're probably right there. I'd second that 100%. He just got absolutely lucky. Now, Stenberg's managed to, actually in actual fact, Stenberg has managed to just clear away from Will Devonish here. Just broken the camel's back here as Turmo decides to go into pit lane. Devonish got past him on the run down to 6, but this gap is now at the 1.6 seconds. This is sort of the luxury that Will enjoyed for quite a bit of the first half of this race. Stenberg just rubs the Armco out of 3.
Hathaway and Peter been at it all lap. Nolan made a mistake behind him at the hairpin, which has dropped him back and out of the battle a little bit, but these guys have been side by side since the hairpin.
Well, here they are. Pete Savage rounds up Mitch Hathaway. That's a very, very nice pass. Oh, and a little bit of blocking, a little bit of bumping as well going on, and Savage got a bit of a shove from Hathaway. Nolan's taken full advantage of that. Is he going to get a 2-for-1 special? Is he going to get a very nice toe down here to the hairpin? Hathaway's just going to have to park it in the middle of the road. He leaves enough space on the inside, but that's...
Is yellow flags out in that zone,
Oh, yeah, I was about to say, did the yellow flag get cleared before that pass got done? That'll be very touch and go there. Nolan was behind. I did see the yellow flag out on the left-hand side there. But nonetheless, he's got a 2-for-1 special done, Scott Nolan, taking full advantage of the satellite teammates getting into each other at turn 1.
It looks like Hathaway's redressed that little bit of contact and let Peter go. And in fact, looks like Nolan's actually lost a little bit of time under braking because Peter has caught right up to the back of Nolan. Obviously, Nolan pitted, I think, was it lap 11 or lap 13 or in that sort of range. His rear tyres aren't going to be in good shape. Well, these guys' tyres are much, much better.
Yeah, lap 13, he was in first of the runners to stop. He came in after he had that issue down at the hairpin where he ran off and did a U-bolt in the gravel trap. There's some Lime Mitch flashing some lights back there behind Kalen Duncan, who's actually a lap down. There's actually pretty good performance from Lime Mitch here, Hans. There's more chaos down here at the hairpin. Yeah, there was a bit of chaos. I think a few cars getting into each other at the hairpin, but they've all managed to get going. Lime Mitch has done a fantastic job on debut as a wildcard, up from 10th to 8th, and just run his own race.
Yeah, good to see Lime Mitch up there. Quite achiever. He stayed out of trouble, and he's reaping the benefits now. He's moved up 2 positions from his starting spot, and he currently is in 8th. And if all these shenanigans go on between Nolan and the two an HDS car and the loose Sim Sport car, then he may be he could be standing to gain up to 5th position here if he plays his cards right. As we see Luke Joyner, he gets in the way, another one of the wildcard entries in the Penrite Commodore. And yeah, Lime Mitch, I'm really impressed with his effort. I've been following his efforts in the Super 2 series as Pete Savage has a move down the inside of Nolan as Kurt Stenberg comes across the line to take the win.
Yeah, we've unfortunately missed that, so Kurt Stenberg stays perfect. Wins from Will Devonish, and it will be Brenton Foley to pick up his first podium finish of the year ahead of his teammate Phil Boak. But let's go back to that battle that's going on here. So Pete Savage having to defend really, really heavily from Nolan. Nolan sends it! Nolan sends it at second to last corner, and that has not come off. So that means Pete Savage will get 5th. It'll be 6th for Mitch Hathaway. Lime Mitch is going to get 7th. Great result for Lime Mitch. So first of the Mustangs home, the only Mustang that's out there in the field. And then Scotty Nolan has gone from 5th to 8th in the final 2 corners.
There's a little bit of contact between Peter and Nolan coming out of the hairpin down that straight. So I don't know what happened there, but there was a little bit of biffing and barging. But in the end, Nolan just overcooked it. But it has to be said, great battle for the lead between Stenberg and Devonish. Capped off pretty entertaining race, really. At the front, obviously, did have Foley and sort of Boat have fairly quiet races, but really, really good result for the team's championship for PBF. And then Peter and Mitch also putting in some strong runs as well.
Absolutely, very, very healthy battle at the front for the majority of the race. It just sort of broke apart in the last 5 or 6 laps or so. This is a good result on screen. Wildcard Liam Spencer, drafted in to replace Aaron Thomas, has had a top 10 finish on debut in the main game category here, Hans, and he's managed to finish ahead of a pretty established and accomplished sim racer in Zach Ross, holding him off for P10 for P9 at the flag.
Yeah, Liam Spencer, an even quieter achiever than Lime Mitch, so good to see Liam and Mitch get up there. So Liam Spencer, first race for the CRE Motorsport Pro B team in the car vacated by Aaron Thomas, and looks like they might keep him for a little while longer. Liam Spencer, he's doing a good job.
And we're just waiting to see if we were going to get our customary photo at the end of pit lane, but I think Will Devonish has decided to put it in the garage, so he's probably forgotten what the new procedure actually is meant to be. But that's all right. That's the first 38 laps of tonight's proceedings over and done with, as we will take a break for a little bit to collect our breath and just have a bit of a chat, I guess, about what happened in that race. So, as Lewis, as you alluded to, pretty healthy battle at the front for a long period of that race. Just, as we said, in the last sort of 5 or 6 laps, it just started to break apart.
Yeah, sort of the first half of the race sort of fell into Devonish's lap with, obviously he got himself into the lead and ahead of Stenberg. And then when Foley was able to sneak up into second as well, Dev was able to build up a little bit of a gap, but Stenberg showed his class, was able to get himself back into second place. And then when they were together on track, it was no holds barred. And I think either driver really 1.1 seconds separating the two at the end, but either of those drivers really did deserve the win today. They were a step above and put on a really good show.
Well, you're absolutely right. Well, we haven't got our race winner here at the moment. We've certainly got our second place victor in Will Devonish. Will, as Lewis just alluded to, very, very healthy battle for the majority of that race, especially after the pit stop sequence as well. You had a little bit of a margin for a point in time. It was out to about 2 or so seconds with Foley holding up Kurt for just a little bit for about 4 or 5 laps. Where did all that time go? Because after a little while, it was all gone.
Yeah, Kurt he destroys me in the first sector. It's just the first sector, and the rest I'm able to match him or sneak away a little bit. But yeah, just turn 1 and 2, he's on my tail, and then I have to hold him off at the hairpin. So it was a great ding dong battle. I really enjoyed that.
You got to. I know you just said Kurt destroys you in the first sector, which we had seen. He'd set up some really, really good moves, especially coming out of turn 1. He got you on one occasion, and down at the hairpin, of course, exceptionally strong. Have you got a particular sector that you feel you're better at than him, or are you sort of a little bit, hit and miss on all those sectors, and that's where it sort of bleeds away a little bit?
Yeah, I think depends on really the lap with the hairpin. I think we can both match each other. I feel in the last sector, I can carry the sweeping turns a bit better than his car. We spent a lot of time on this setup, so I'm really happy with the car. And I also feel earlier on in the race with the car being heavy, we're a bit stronger as well. Just see what we can do next race when the car lightens up a bit.
Well, let's hope you can go one step better in the next one. And just very quickly as well, you've drafted Liam Spencer in to replace the injured Aaron Thomas. Pretty inspired choice. We've got to be very happy with the top 10 for him on debut.
Yeah, really proud of him. Kept his nose clean. Top 10, couldn't ask for anything more, really.
We look forward to seeing what he can do in race 2 alongside yourself. So well done on second place. We go up to Brenton Foley. Brenton, first podium for the year, believe it or not. It's taken to race 4 to get it. You've been pretty consistent. You've had a little bit of some moments in some of the other races, but you've got to be happy to put yourself on the podium for the first time this year.
Yeah, it's about time. I been a bit annoyed at myself for not getting a podium. Stenberg and Devonish have really Stenberg's always been fast, but Will has just absolutely lifted this season, and it's going to be very hard for me to catch up a little bit. I'm playing catch up, but yeah, overall really happy to get the podium. Those two are just so fast. I had a really good viewing of their battle. As Will said, Kurt's really fast in sector 1. I feel like I'm losing all my time in sector 3 to those two, but got some work to do and see what I can do.
Well, you've got plenty of guys in the team that you can lean on. You've got your teammate Phil Boak. You've also got the satellite team guys in there as well, Rhodey, D2, and Brendan Ross. You're all collaboratively working together on getting a setup that not only befits your car, but also all 5 of the cars that are in the stable. What's it like working in the team with those guys? You've got a bit of a different dynamic from last year where it was just the pair of you. Now there's 5 of you in that channel.
Oh, we had Rhodey last year, but kind of last year he was kind of developing and he's got a lot better now. But having Dwayne and Rossi on board has been just amazing. I've always worked with Rossi really well in TCC and TCR. We've had a lot of success there. So working together on the setup in V8s it's finally paying dividends where we're learning kind of what we like together and moving forward.
Fantastic. Well, you're doing well not only in this series, but you're doing well in a lot of the other series as well. You've got a very, very multidisciplined racing skill set across all the platforms that you race in, but you've got to dial out the right one every night, and you dialed it out for a podium tonight. So let's see what you can do in race 2. You're off the second row of the grid for the second race.
Yep, looking forward to it. It should be a good one.
Well, the man that's off the front row of the grid alongside Will Devonish is going to be Kurt Stenberg. Kurt, that certainly wasn't easy. That goes up there with the opening race of Albert Park a couple of weeks ago. That was a difficult challenge to get over for a little while, wasn't it?
Yeah, I didn't drive particularly well in the first half of that race, to be honest. And Will got up there, and then I fell back a bit, and it was a bit of an effort to get back to him and get back to the lead and take the win out.
Well, the guys have already mentioned very, very regularly that you're very, very strong in sector one. So your braking for turn one is very, very good from what we can see on the broadcast. You set up some really, really nice moves out of turn one for passing into turn three, and actually the move that got you the lead back, I think permanently, was done out of turn one, where you just seized on a moment where Will just carried a bit too much brake, opened up the door, and you were through in a flash.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time. I worked with Colin Warwick and Thomas McMillan on a setup for this round for ASC, and obviously I've carried that through to this just with some slight changes. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to make sure that I was pretty good through turn one. So the car's pretty good through the whole track, but yeah, gets a good exit out of turn one. If you get in there right, it's awesome.
Yeah, plenty of time to be gained. It's no different to the hairpin. If you get your turn one sorted out, or you get the hairpin sorted out, you get that nice, beautiful drag off the corner. You carry that extra couple of k's an hour speed into the braking zone, so you're already making gains very, very incrementally. So it makes it very, very easy for you to get a pass done if you've got that sort of speed on board the car.
Yeah, that's exactly right. At a track like this, that's basically three straights. It's all about corner exit speed and trying to get off the corner for pace. And yeah, if you can get off the corner well, it's not just fast over one lap, it's also fast to get past people. So you want to make sure that you can get runs on people and get past them.
And the difficult part of it being that to get onto those three straights, all three of them are different corners. The turn one's a medium speed corner, the hairpin's a slow speed corner, and the last corner's a relatively high speed corner. So if you've got your car set up to do very well, just as you're doing, you are going to walk away with a race win. But you stay perfect through the fourth race of the season, and it's going to take some catching to knock you off at the moment. But you're driving very, very well, so well done.
No worries, thanks, mate. Look forward to this one. Let's see how we go.
Well, we certainly will look forward to see what's going on, as we're just getting a few drivers to get themselves sorted again for the second race of the evening. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back after this for the second race of the evening, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. You are watching the Tassie Twin Sprint, the third round of the Automobilista Australia Supercars Championship for 2020. Hans, we saw a pretty good opening race there, 38 laps. It went down to the nail or down to the wire rather, for majority of that race, but just in the last 5 minutes or so, it was the man that they're all chasing, Kurt Stenberg, who just managed to eke away and get the job done.
Yeah, Kurt Stenberg in the end, it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, as it were, and Will Devonish had nothing for him in the end. The final margin was about 1.5 seconds, so Will Devonish, he fought hard and tried to stick with him, but unfortunately his outright pace wasn't quite as good as Stenberg, but he did stick with him for quite a while and did jump him in the pit lane, so that was pretty impressive. But Will Devonish, it just shows how much he's improved from last season, and that now he's one of the main protagonists in this series. And good to see Foley up there as well. He's actually got a run on the board now, so he's no longer on donuts. He's got a podium. And again, Kurt Stenberg, what a fantastic driver. He was just able to just maximize all his braking opportunities. And he said in the interview after the race that his setup was just really good coming off the first corner. So pretty impressed with Stenberg as always, but also impressive down the field. I also enjoyed watching Lime Mitch and Liam Spencer have a good go, and quiet achievers, stayed out of trouble and managed to finish in the top 10. Very impressed.
Yeah, that's, as we said a couple of times on the back end of that race, that Liam Spencer's done a very, very good job. His father will be proud of him in one hand, and then his father won't be proud of him in the other hand because he'll want to have finished ahead of him. And we keep saying whenever there's siblings in or fathers and sons, which we've seen several times in Automobilista in a number of the series that we run, we always say we'd like to be a fly on the wall for some interesting discussions that happen in those households. So Liam and Wayne Spencer is one combination. The other combination we know about is Noah and Greg Turra.
Yeah, it always makes for an interesting debrief at the dinner table. And when you get into each other, sometimes you end up, it's a bit of a frosty reception afterwards. And we have seen that when Mitch Hathaway and Billy Douglas, along with them, they used to live together after what happened at Phillip Island last year. I don't think they managed to live it down, but they didn't speak to each other for about half an hour. So I guess that's what happens when you come from a racing family. I'm sure Stephen and Jim Richards had the same issue back in the days.
Yeah, that's one of the conversations that we love to bring up every now and again, is just the kind of silly antics that we went through when we look back at that Phillip Island race from last year and what exactly happened to those two. And they just said, look, we were living in the same place, we're good mates, we'd share a house together at the time, but then when they both crashed out, they were like just sitting at opposite ends of the room for like 30 minutes, and and when one went to open their mouths, like, nope, just don't say anything. Nothing. It's like the Daniel Ricciardo thing. Nothing you can say is going to make this any better.
Yeah, no matter how hard you try, it just sort of goes all south from there. But no, it's quite funny how those things work. Sometimes you just got to be able to be nice and diplomatic about it.
You're absolutely spot on. You just got to be very, very diplomatic about it sometimes, and just let it blow over, I think, is probably the right thing to say in a situation like that. So we're just waiting for a couple of small things to happen with getting the grids all set and established. And it looks like we are not too far away from going. We actually had another car join the session, which is going to have to start from the rear of grid, and that is Thomas McMillan. Now, if you guys remember correctly, Thomas McMillan campaigned the Nick Percat car, the same car that Colin Warwick is in at the last round in Albert Park. And he's now got his own livery. It's a VB livery, and we are just watching him on the last couple of laps of the practice session before we tick over to a race. Lewis Wedding has now joined us in the box after a bit of a team debrief, I'd imagine, Lewis, over in the Loose Sim Sport channel.
Yeah, a bit of a debrief. Obviously, asked how the drivers are going and how their races went, and they all seem, aside from obviously Billy with his drive through, and he did actually send my Mitch off the road at some point. Aside from that, I mean, and Burko had a little bit of an issue. Aside from that, their pace is quite good, and they're hoping to just put it all together and have a nice clean run here in race 2.
Well, without giving too much away, do you think they're going to go the same avenue on the strategy that they did last round, or they're just going to sort of change it up on the fly depending on whatever situation they come across?
Well, there was a bit of a talk about certain situations and when to pit. So depending on how the race plays out, we might see a bit of a deviancy in obviously the strategies for what the drivers may run, but that depends on what situation each driver's in. But see, they all had fairly decent pace. Hopefully, they can put it all together and get some good screen time and get a good result for all of them.
Lewis, when you find that some of your drivers have been involved in incidents together, not necessarily punting each other off, but when they're involved in the same incident, do you have to get a bit of counselling going in the team debrief?
No, they're actually quite good, because there has been obviously between myself and Zach at the last round and at Adelaide, Zach and Peter had a little bit of a coming together, but they're actually quite good. They normally just chat over things, and there's no animosity between them. So in that respect, I don't really have to talk to them about it. And when they're racing each other too, they generally show respect with each other and don't cost each other time, which is good to see.
There's about 30 seconds or so left in this warm-up session. Not too many cars have opted to take the track. Of course, we just said Thomas McMillan has gotten out there and done a couple of laps just to get himself reacquainted with the circuit, having run it only 2 nights ago over at the Automobilista Supercars Championship. Our friends Stairs and Madbird over there doing wonderful things with the commentary this year, and the broadcast, it has to be said. Stairs' graphics are second to none. They certainly put mine to shame, and he is one of the benchmark gentlemen when it comes to content production in sim racing. So go and check those guys out over there. They are doing some wonderful things with the amount of cars that they have got turning up to some of their races. That being said, we've got a pretty good field of cars here tonight too, Hans.
Yeah, really good to see. A full complement almost. Now we're up to 25 cars due to the addition of Thomas McMillan, and he's in his very own car, the beautifully presented Pleb Sim Sport ZB Commodore. And yeah, it's a very, very interesting livery. And those of us from South Australia probably won't like it. I'm not South Australian, but the South Australians won't like it, and the New South Welshmen won't like it, but I guess the Victorians like it. Victoria Bitter, a CUB product.
Well, I'm particularly not a fan of VB. I've had one every now and again, but it's not to my taste, but I know precisely where you're coming from. There it is. You can see it on the back end of the grid there, the green and white liveried Pleb SimSport VB ZB Commodore. It doesn't sort of go well together, does it? VB and ZB were 2 models of car that
sounds like a bit of a tongue twister, doesn't it? But it actually why I like the livery is because it reminds me of the old VB Challenge cars in the V8 Supercars events, which they would do, early morning sort of time as a bit of a sideshow to the race. So I actually like the look of it, and a bit of a popular livery on the R Factor days also.
Getting set to undertake formation lap here. I think just about everybody is out of the pit lane and onto the grid, and indeed they are. We're just going to wait for the pole sitter to get this formation lap underway, and there he goes. So Race 1 winner Kurt Stenberg maintains his pole position start as per the progressive grid rules introduced for this year. He maintains that advantage over Will Devenish, so the front row as they started the last race, again this race, so too the second row of the grid, Brenton Foley and Phil Boak will start out of positions 3 and 4, same places that they started the last race. Then it starts to get a little bit different. Pete Savage had a good drive up to P5 for Team Loose Sim Sport. Heading home, Mitch Hathaway, the Team Loose Sim Sport HDS car, the first of those blue Ford Falcon FGXs home. Great drive from wildcard line Mitch. Highest position of the wildcards, the only Ford Mustang there, P7. Scotty Nolan was in the banking for P5. He faded to P8 in the final 2 corners. Good debut for Liam Spencer. Out of P9, he can make some positions from there. I think he's still got another 1 or 2 in him, especially with the tutelage of Will Devenish behind him as well. And then Zach Ross making it a pair of Loose Sim Sport Falcons in the top 10. BDS, he'll want a top 10 after this one, doing some Super 2 running as well. He'll be alongside Dwayne Davies on row 6. And we get back to Steve Burko, the first of the Volvo S60s. He's going to get a new livery between now and the next race at Barbagallo. He shares row 7 with Brendan Ross. That's a bit of a disaster for Brendan Ross, having faded so badly in that first race. Luke Joyner and Caelan Duncan are going to share the next row of the grids. That's row 8 with 2 wildcards there. And then back to Cam Rutledge and Turmo, actually on the Dean circuit, actually Cam Rutledge and Scott Stancliffe will share row 9. And then it's Turmo and Rhodey, who's going to start from the pit lane. So he's missed the start. He's going to have to start from the pit lane. Then we get back to the first of the DNFers in Colin Warwick. Wayne Spencer did not get home in that first race, so he will start P22. Brian Walsh and Glenn Miles, the Scuderia Alitalia cars, will start off of the second to last row of the grid. And Thomas McMillan, joining for the second race of the night, will start dead plumb last, and he's going to have a lot of work to do, Hans.
Definitely not the ideal place to be starting at Symmons Plains Raceway as we look to the front of the grid, and Devonish again, he's pointed right at the apex of turn 1.
Well, here we go. Getting ready to go for second race of the night. Everybody's now in position. We'll hear the lights start to go off in the background. There they are. What can Devonish make of this start to race 2? We're about to find out. And he didn't.
Shocking start.
He didn't get a good launch. Again, that's actually worse than the launch he had out of the first race. It was a little bit closer. Meanwhile, it's a bit of a side-by-side action behind. Again, it looks pretty well behaved back there as well. Thomas McMillan looks like he's made up a spot or two out of the slow starters at the back of the field. And then look at this. The top two have cleared out. And there's a bit of daylight. Back to Brenton Foley, fending off Phil Boak, fending off Pete Savage.
Nolan almost into the back of one of the LSS cars. That was a big out.
Oh, there's a lot of accidents, a lot of calamity happening. I can hear it in the background. There's people on the exit. Rossi and
McMillan, Rutledge also involved, as well as Wayne. Looks like he had an adventure off at the hairpin as well.
Well, let's go and have a look at the replay. That deserves a bit of a look because there was a bit of bump and grind on the exit of the hairpin as well. We saw Stancliffe and Brennan Ross. Oh, geez, great bit of driving from Scott Nolan to avoid all the chaos that happened all there. Oh, look at that. Thomas McMillan got absolutely out of shape. Let's just rewind it a little bit. He actually got run into there by Wayne Spencer. So Spencer getting into the back of McMillan, getting across Rutledge, and the pair of them going into the kitty litter. Geez, that's a bit of a messy start.
And that's what happens here at Symmons Plains. You end up being a pinball when cars start getting into each other on the run into the hairpin.
Stenberg outbrake himself. He's in the barrier. Devonish has hit him, and that means Foley's into the lead. So disaster for Stenberg. He's down a number of spots down into P8.
Spot there.
My goodness, what has happened there? Let's again, the hairpin strikes again. Stenberg had a brilliant advantage. He actually had probably close to a second. Here it is. He just get his braking wrong. Yeah, on the outside, just completely lost it. Couldn't modulate the pedal.
Now broke himself at the final corner, and now Boak is into the lead.
Wow, changing hand over fist. We want to look at all the replays here. We're not going to be able to get them all done in time. Let's go back to live pictures as Stenberg gets past Lime Mitch. And Devonish got a piece of the barrier there on that corner as well, having to try and avoid Kurt Stenberg. So changing hand over fist. Phil Boak leads the race for the first time this year.
Top 5 at the moment. It's basically on for young and old as we see. I think that's Mitch Hathaway at the back. He's actually closed up on the back, and Foley gets into the back of Peter Savage. So it's all, yeah, like I said, it's on for young and old, and it's very bump and grind in the first opening laps here. Very tame in the first race, but not so tame in the second race, boys.
Well, the first corner was about as tame as it got. I think after that it started to really get interesting. Now this is a problem here because Devonish will want to clear Boak. Boak's just gone a little bit deep. Devonish will have the inside here. Bit of bump, bit of barge. Devonish is through. Now he's got to make this stick. He's really got to drive away from Boak and quickly because Stenberg has got a little bit of a gap behind and a bit of a gap in front. He's now got to get past Mitch Hathaway. He does set the quickest lap of the race there. Boak's all sorts of sideways. That holds up Pete Savage. That's going to give Foley a run out of turn 2. Can Foley do anything with this?
They've got cars around at turn 1 as well. They've got Warwick off and got another car. I think that's Burko around as well. So it is all happening in the first 4 laps.
Let's just stay here because...
No, teammates are together. Absolute disaster for PBF.
I don't think that was a teammate issue. I think that was one of the loose SimSport cars getting into him.
Off as well. We've also got Joyner off at their hairpin. We've got Turbo contact as well. 3 wide as well with Wayne, Nolan and Warwick all at their hairpin. So it is chaotic.
I think that was actually, it was one of the loose SimSport cars getting in. Yeah, it was. It was that was Pete Savage getting to the back of Boak. Foley managed to get away with it, and then Boak straight into the fence. And you can see just out of here, Dougal Salong, I think, just out-braking himself. And there was also another car back there. That was Luke Joyner doing it as well. So everybody's pushing the limits on this opening lap when they really don't need to be. Boak's running around without a bonnet now. He's down to P10. Scott Stancliffe and Caelan Duncan have somehow managed to avoid some of this chaos. They're now right with Phil Boak as well. Guys, we're going to lose track of what's going on here. Has anybody got a notepad or a bit of paper or something to work out how many times there's been changed the position in the opening 5 laps?
Even if I had a notepad, it would be frantically writing down so fast the thing would catch fire. You can't write fast enough to get all the notes down. But Stenberg, incidentally, has gotten past Foley, and he actually bumped him up against the berm, running out of the hairpin. So bit of bump and grind there, bit of elbows up for Kurt Stenberg, and he's just hip and shouldered him wide. Now Kurt Stenberg is unleashed from the pack, and I guess the Red Sea is parted for him. Right
He's had a bit of a break lock there going into turn 1, which is where he's been so strong as well, but he manages to hold that together. Foley going to have a bit of a run here, I think, maybe just out of turn 2. Probably a bit far back to send it up the inside here at the hairpin, but he has a bit of a look anyway, just trying to distract Stenberg, just trying to think maybe I'm going to send it, and he does outbrake himself a bit there, but Foley's not close enough to try and get alongside, nor is he in position to drag him out of the hairpin.
I think that wider and later on the brakes as well, coming out of the hairpin, is actually giving him a bit of a boost down the straight as well. So even if Foley did have a decent run out of the hairpin, I don't think he would have been able to do anything with it, because Stenny would have had the slightly better acceleration. But the key for Stenny now is to just be consistent for a couple laps, break the toe of Foley in behind, and then set his sights on Devonish in front, who has avoided all the carnage, and 3.2 seconds in the lead. This will be as good a chance as any for him to obviously break the Kurt Stenberg winning streak right here.
Absolutely. Hans, people that have managed to avoid the chaos so far here have benefited. This man's one of them again. We pumped up his tyres a little bit on debut. He's already made 3 positions on lap 1, Liam Spencer.
Not only that, Liam Spencer, Zach Ross and Lime Mitch, I believe, in the Mustang there, they've done a pretty good job to avoid all that. Actually, that move, if I may make a remark on the move that Peter Savage tried to make on Phil Boak, he actually snookered him into the wall, and it was lucky that Foley didn't catch him more than he already did. So a bit of damage on board for Foley, but luckily he's able to fight another day. But looks like it's over and out for Phil Boak at the moment. He's down in 10th, and he's under attack from Scott Stancliffe.
Yeah, he's got a lot of work to do.
Bonnet.
Yeah, that's with the collision from the wall at the hairpin. He actually went into the wall pretty hard. Liam Spencer's got a good, calm head on young shoulders at the minute, defending very, very well from Zach Ross at the moment, who's now coming under some pressure from He's coming under some pressure from Lime Mitch aboard the Mustang. Too many Mitches.
Mitches and Rosses everywhere.
Yeah, Mitches and Rosses everywhere. And that's a pretty good move, actually. That's a really good move by Lime Mitch out of the hairpin. Got a nice drive off, going to be in position around the outside here if you can stay with him, but he just hasn't got the speed. Just that last little section here, tries to get a little bit of the draft and have another run. But Zach Ross is very much aware of that move coming.
We've had Foley outbrake himself at the penultimate corner again. That's allowed Pete to move up into 3rd, and now he's got Mitch Hathaway right behind him as well.
Yeah, Mitch Hathaway looking pretty racy as well. Good result for Mitch Hathaway in that first race, and looking to go 1 or 2 better here. Monstering the back of the VF Commodore at the moment. This is closer than Foley was to the car ahead on the previous lap, but still not quite close enough to make the move stick. You can try and distract your opponent down here, see if they'll outbrake themselves. Foley going a little bit deep, but that's okay. He's going to hold on for a little bit longer. He'll have the right position around this sweeping right-hand bend to turn 5.
We'll also have a little bit of a toe as well in front from Peter, just sort of helping Foley to have a little bit of a speed advantage over Hathaway. But the key for Foley after that mistake is just to keep it clean for a lap or 2 and not give Hathaway any opportunity to get by.
Mitch Hathaway Lewis was one of the drivers that came in pretty much spot on the halfway mark and actually managed to make that strategy work really, really well for him. We saw that some of the guys that came in earlier, like your Scott Nolans and that, faded toward the back end of that second stint in the first race. What's the right strategy call here, given that we've had so many chaotic moments already on the opening lap, and there's quite a number of battle packs starting to form? So getting into a part of the track where it's clean air if you come in for a stop, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a very, very well-timed stop if you get it right.
Well, you're probably not going to get the perfect amount of clean air, but if you're just in an area where you're not battling with people, you're going to be a little bit faster. So for maybe Pete, I'd probably, say stay out. But if you're Brent and Foley, you've made a couple mistakes which has dropped you into the clutches of Hathaway and out of the podium spot. It might be an idea to pit just a little bit early, get some clear air running, and to calm down a little bit, and to try and get that position on the podium back. Same can be said for Lion Mitch as well down in 8th. He's stuck behind Zach Ross and Liam Spencer, who are duking it out. So either of those guys might be an idea just to come in a lap or two early. And same with Phil Boak as well. He's not too far away as well. Come in a bit early, pick some damage you might have, get some fresh tyres on and not be battling. And you might find yourself up.
There's the loss of 2 positions for Pete Savage there at the hairpin. He made a bit of a mockery of it. He's lost position to Foley, so Foley goes back up into P3. Mitch Hathaway goes up into P4 and has got quite a nice little buffer there as well. He'll just move it over to the right-hand side right now. There he goes. Foley again with a trail of smoke going into the second to last corner. Hathaway's gone off onto the grass, and that immediately undoes all the hard work that he had to do to take advantage down at the hairpin on Pete Savage. Meanwhile, Hans, what are you looking at down here? Thomas McMillan has retired from this race.
So Thomas McMillan, he became loose coming out of the first corner, and he's just ended up pinballing off the walls. And luckily for Burko and I believe Glenn Miles, they managed to avoid him. But DNF for Thomas McMillan, so disastrous for him after coming off a pretty good round at the Albert Park circuit.
Now, there's already starting to be a little bit of lap traffic coming into play here, I think, as well. Brenton Foley is closing in on the back of, who's that he's ahead of? He's closing in on the back of Colin Warwick.
Also got Zach Ross has just served his pit stop, so he's looking to get a little bit of an undercut going. Got Turmo off at the hairpin and Stancliffe, it looks like he's clipped the barrier as well, but I was just having a look at the gap between first and second. Devonish had got the gap out to 4.2 seconds, but they've been going through some traffic, so it's come down to 3.6. But overall, though, Devonish has just been edging away through the traffic and some clean driving, and he's putting himself in a prime position to nab a win here.
Just seeing a replay of Turmo getting it all wrong at the hairpin. Actual fact, Scott Stancliffe whacked the barriers on the outside too. I thought there may have been a redress going on, but it actually looks like Kalen Duncan was just off the road on the driver's left.
Sorry, Steve, a move made by Lime Mitch on Liam Spencer. And Liam Spencer hangs tough on the outside now. Coming around the curve straight, turn 5. And pretty good run for Spencer there, but he's not going to have the run all the way through. He's not going to have the momentum. And Lime Mitch, move him up 1 position. He's in 6th.
Yeah, nice move by Lime Mitch. Puts the Mustang up into P6 and taking advantage, as we said, of the opportunities out of the hairpin, which is primary passing zone going into, but it's also the primary spot to go, get a good drag out, and that's just made all that hard work go to absolute buggery. Lime Mitch having a massive moment off the final corner. That is a very, very rookie mistake.
Very, very easy to do at the final corner there. He's just got his outside tyres onto the grass, and once you do that, there's no grip, and he found out the hard way by going around. He did a good job J-turning it into the barrier, and thankfully for both himself and for Boak, didn't cause a separate accident out of that.
No, he's very, very lucky as he rejoined the racing circuit. He had a very good presence of mind to get over to the right-hand side and get toward the pit lane complex and rejoin in a very safe manner, which is something that would have been executed very, very well by the driver's briefing people prior to tonight's race. Here's Scott Nolan having a look at Billy Douglas so long. Just ahead, Lime Mitch has gone off in the background. I've just seen him gone almost straight on at the second to last corner. Hans, you want to take a look at that for me? He's gone miles off course to see what happens to him if he comes back, but Scott Nolan is now through on BDS. What happened to Lime Mitch on that other lap? He's had another moment again.
Also had Mitch Hathaway into the pits as well, so a number of guys changing the strategy up in this one just to try and get a little bit of an undercut going. Also had Peter and Foley just they were struggling to get by. I think that's Colin Warwick in the Dunlop car as they were going to lap him, so they were struggling to get by him because
Hathaway's just got himself a drive-through penalty as well, so that's just absolutely compounded his race and made it even worse. So having to come in early, trying to change the strategy up has not worked, and he's going to have to tour the lane yet again. So he's come out of the pits. Where's he on the order? He's down in P17, so he's actually going to go behind Colin Warwick once he serves that drive-through.
So Lime Mitch, he was braking the car while the car wasn't 100% straight. It just pitched him off onto the grass and it was all over and out from there. So he's actually pitted in this next lap by, but it's not ideal for Lime Mitch, especially we're pumping up his tyres before the Super 2 championship leader, I should say. And looks like in the Super 2 stakes, or rather Liam Spencer, the Young Gun stakes, he's actually up in 5th at the moment.
Yeah, it's staying up there in fifth at the moment by virtue of a couple of drivers having come in to take their stops. Well, Mitch Hathaway was up there as well, and we just alluded to him having a drive-through penalty as well. Lewis, what do you got there? You've had a bit of a thought?
Yeah, it looks like he's just come in too hot. I'm actually having a look at Brendan Ross. He's had a bit of an off at the final corner, but when I did have a look at the way Hathaway entered the pits, it looked like he'd gone off on the grass, so perhaps he'd made a mistake and just thought, well, I might as well just pit now. And that's maybe one of the reasons why he came in a little bit too hot. So a bit of a shame for him, but if he keeps it clean, he can still pick up a decent result with still 22 or so laps to go.
Want to give a little shout out to everybody watching along on the live stream, wherever you happen to be in Australia, whether you're actually outside of Australia on this big blue planet we call planet Earth. Whoop. Oh,
Devonish is off, you're right.
You're right,
He's off the road at the second last corner, and that actually brings Thomas McMillan way back into this battle. He's actually 1.5 seconds now behind Devonish.
That's a huge loss. He had a 3-odd second lead as well, and that's now become 1.2 seconds. This is now officially game on. Sorry to those guys in the live chat. I was actually just about to say thanks for supporting the live stream and for the very kind comments that are starting to come through. But then we had to cut to this that just happened out of the middle of nowhere, and Devon's just made another mistake down here at the hairpin. Stenberg's made another one behind, but not as bad. But now it's down to a second, and coming down to where it's about time where you start thinking about your pit stop strategy. This is crucial now. This margin has gotten very, very small very, very quickly. It has basically been shaved by about 60-odd%.
Yeah, he's going to be in an awkward spot now, is Will Devonish. Do you decide to pit, put some fresh tyres on and try and maintain a little bit of a gap? Or do you stay out there and try and get Kurt Stenberg to try and undercut you? It's one of those awkward positions you can sometimes find yourself in when you're in the lead, but you've got someone right behind you. So next couple of laps, they're going to be crucial for him not to make a mistake, but also it's going to be crucial when he decides to pit.
Problem number one just eradicated itself just beyond about half a minute ago. That was Luke Joyner coming into the pits to serve his pit stop, so that meant that Will Devonish didn't have to get past him on track. The next problem up the road is one of the team cars, which I think is Cam Rutledge. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Hans. It looks like he's the next one in the queue. There'll be team orders to allow him to go past, and there is indeed Cam Rutledge, looking like he might be coming into the lane as well with a bit of luck. No, he's going around again, so there'll probably be a pass made, I would imagine, down the back or the front straight into the hairpin.
I imagine Cam will make it pretty easy. Oh,
he's
well,
gone
he
off the
actually
road.
runs off the road there, so that makes it even easier for Devonish. But Stenberg, he ran into traffic, so the exiting from the pits, Luke Joyner, actually held up Stenberg a little bit.
Just a fraction as Cam Rutledge exited stage right through the kitty litter.
Bit of contact between a lapping car with Foley trying to get past Glenn Miles coming out at turn 2, while at the same time have had Peter enter the pit. So it's crucial that Foley puts in a good couple laps here, or lap in fact, because it looks like he's going to pit on this lap, and that certainly won't help his chances of staying in front of Pete for that final spot on the podium.
Well, here is that move you were just alluding to. So Glenn Miles just fractionally deep at the hairpin, but then he was on the racing line, so Foley had to go the long way around. Miles sort of did all he could to basically got hung up on that right-hand side curb at turn 3, so it wasn't severe for Foley, but it certainly gave him a little bit of a scare there. And of course, he's got a lap runner as well there in Colin Warwick, who's just trying to hang on to the back of that Commodore and see where it can drag him. And Foley's now decided it's time to come in, so just fractionally after the halfway mark, the defending champion from last year has decided it's time to take service.
Yeah, just waiting to see, well, having a scan around the track to try and see where Peter is. Looks like he's around that sort of back straight area, and he's behind one of the Ali Italia cars, one of the Nissans, I think. So still a ways to go for him. Devonish still leads. He's just edged away, in fact, a little bit from Stenberg. So he's steadied the ship, as we see Foley.
Devonish is into the pit lane, and he takes service now, and it looks like
Stenberg goes around.
Stenberg goes around again, so Stenberg's pace is much better. He can go further on in this stint. But will there be a benefit of the undercut for Devonish? We're not sure yet.
Keep an eye on that one for us, Hans. Keep an eye on Will Devonish in the pit lane just to see how he comes out, because there was only 2 or 3 other cars in there. I think Steve Burko was in too. We're not sort of getting the levels of cars that were coming in for services. There's a bit of calamity at the hairpin, and Stenberg's going to have to do his best to navigate that. That's Kalen Duncan and Pete Savage getting into each other a little bit. So Savage has actually come out of that is actually a lap down now officially to Kurt Stenberg, but it didn't hold Stenny up too much. Then will Stenny react immediately? Well, we're watching here. I think he's going to make it happen. Yep.
His pit crew are ready, so he should dive into the pits here.
And bingo bango, there he is.
And incidentally, Will Devenish is out. The other two cars in the pit lane were Steve Burko and Cam Rutledge. So pretty slick stop by the CRE Motorsport guys. They managed to service 2 cars in one.
And Foley and Pete on the last lap, they've been through traffic, and it's been a war for those guys, with obviously Pete that we did just see get held up at the hairpin, and coming out of turn 1 there, Foley was walked quite badly. Might have even been one of the PBF sister cars. Might have been Rhodey, I think, in the northern car, getting in his way. See, he's in a fierce battle with Peter in behind, so he needs everything to go his way to try and build a little bit
Stenberg
of a
is
gap.
just reaching the pit lane exit line. Sorry to cut you off, Lewis. And Devenish goes past him, so Devenish maintains the lead, but he's had a bit of a tardy run, and he's off the road. He's in the sand trap.
That's just pushing too hard. That's just asking way too much of the car. He had the lead. He was going to have it comfortably. We just didn't quite catch it because we were cycling through the field to see where everybody else was, because Spencer had gone through, so too had Phil Boak. But here it is, coming round the final corner. Just, I think, a plane out, breaking his move, just pushing a bit too hard. He had the lead. He had it comfortably, pinched it massively. Pinched it well and truly at the very, very beginning of the braking zone for turn 1. And that's just an absolute gimme. Thank you very much, says Kurt Stenberg. I'll have position number 1 back.
You can ask these tyres to do a lot of braking or a lot of steering. They can't do both.
Well, what that's done is it's given Kurt Stenberg quite an almighty advantage. It's giving him probably close to a 3-second advantage here. 2 points, just fractionally under 2.7 now. So Will has really got to show his prowess here. He's got to get the skates on, and he's got to hunt down this TTR Commodore very, very quickly. The question's going to be, can he get back to the rear bumper, and how long is it going to take?
It's given Stenberg a massive free kick here, and he's just free to basically go from the front and see how fast he can go, because he's got a pace advantage. So Will Devenish, I think it might be over and out for him, unless there's some sort of massive mistake on the part of Stenberg, which he's not typically going to do. And Liam Spencer, incidentally, is one of the last cars not to take service, and he is leading.
And so too Phil Boak yet to take service as well, going a little bit longer into this race as a result of having hit the wall down at the hairpin in the early laps of this race. As Caelan Duncan, one of the wildcards there, getting a drive-through penalty. Looks like he's just exiting the pit lane there.
Yeah, drive-through penalty on the pit lane exit. So a bit too trigger happy on the pit lane speed limit button, and it just lights up the wheels and goes above that 40, 42k an hour sort of limit that it starts to penalise you.
So waiting on the field to be fully cleansed. Once Spencer and Boak have come into the lane and take their stops, your effective race leader at the moment is Kurt Stenberg from Will Devenish and Brenton Foley, again up into the podium spots. We've got a yellow flag out here in the early part of the lap. Now, who's had a moment? I think it's probably just down here. Actually, it's Rhodey. So Rhodey
it's Rhodey. He's actually waiting for the blue flags to clear. So good presence of mind from Rhodey there. There was no one behind him, and it just shows that it's a bit safer to do that.
Had Devenish make another mistake as well. The gap was 2.7, and he's gone off at the penultimate corner and cost himself another 3 seconds. So he's went from being 4.2 seconds in the lead early on in this race to now being 5 seconds behind the effective race leader in Stenberg.
Oh, massive accident down at the hairpin. It's actually one of the Scuderia Alitalia cars and the CRE cars. Just try and
who's
see
who's the CRE car involved. I could see that it was one of the Alitalia cars, and possibly Glenn Miles.
I think it's Turmo.
Yeah, you're right. There it is back there. I can just see the Kmart rear wing on that car, so that is Turmo. And then Will Devenish is actually tucked in behind them as well. Now, Stenberg's just gone a little bit deep into turn number 6, but he's managed to keep it on the black stuff, which is the most important thing, so he's not going to lose too much time to Devenish here. Let's have a look at this margin. So Stenberg's last lap is a 52 flat. Devenish comes across the line at 52.2, so it's another 2 seconds. I'm wondering whether or not Will's given up the ghost here, gents. I think he's maybe just trying to bring it home.
Another problem here for D2. He's at the hairpin. He's wedged up against the tyre wall. Liam Spencer should be taking service this lap.
That'll just leave Phil Boak as the only man not to take service. Yep, looks like the pit crew is out for the CRE number 91 car. The Aaron Thomas car being substituted in this round by Liam Spencer, which I think might actually end up being a longer than expected substitution. And there he goes, exit stage right, and down to the pit lane speed limit, well and truly before the line. So very good boy there, making sure he's not going to get penalised for breaking the pit lane speed limit. And that just leaves Phil Boak as the only man yet to take service. Probably expect him in the next 2 or 3 laps.
Just had word, obviously, you've got Mitch Hathaway out of the race, and he's had a problem with his shifter. He was stuck in 6th gear, so big shame for him. He was in a decent spot early on in this race, but shame for his championship hopes and for Team HDS and the team standings as well. So shame for him, but we'll see opportunity for a number of drivers to pick up a decent result with a number of the faster guys sort of out of position.
Well, out of the HDS and Lou Simsport stables, you see Phil Boak with a big moment. Phil Boak with a big moment coming into the second to last corner. I just saw that the spanner had just came up, that he was getting ready for a pit stop, so he was probably readying the pit crew for that to happen, just taking his mind off the job for a little bit, and just outbroken himself there. I was about to say, Lewis, that out of the Lou Simsport and HDS stables, with Mitch Hathaway, who was the leading runner in that group, out of the race, that actually leaves this man on screen here, Pete Savage, as the lead runner out of that stable.
Yeah, well, Pete hasn't had an ideal start to the season. He couldn't race at Albert Park, but yeah, he's done a good job so far this weekend. But he might find himself in a bit of trouble with the stewards. Obviously, early on contact between himself and yeah, Phil Boak it was sending him in the wall. So there might be repercussions from that, but he's done fairly well this weekend. Hathaway, obviously, they're both pretty much identical on pace.
And speaking of Phil Boak, he's just received a penalty for a pit lane speeding infringement, so he's going to have to tour the lane again. So he's come out onto the road in P8. That's going to mean he's going to drop in behind Liam Spencer and Zach Ross. He'll probably go very close to coming out just in front of D2 Dwayne Davies as well.
When he did enter the pits, I did worry that coming on from the grass, he might come in a little bit too hot, and he had to slam on the brakes and was locked up getting into the pits. So I think he's done exactly what BDS did the same thing in the last race. Just come in from the grass, come in too hot, couldn't slow it down, and around here, very, very strict. And very difficult to get under the 40km/h mark to not get yourself a drive-through penalty.
Well, that's one good thing about Super 2. When we raced here on the alternate version of the circuit, we didn't have to worry about the pit stops. It was a full-on sprint race. Hans is out there watching Kurt Stenberg in front just basically go about his business right now, Hans.
Yeah, Kurt Stenberg is pretty relaxed at the moment. He's not setting the lap time charts alight here. He's just pretty solidly in the low 52s at the moment, so he's just done a 52.096, and that's pretty much been his pace for the last few laps. And although Devonish is maybe half a second faster than him some laps, I don't think it's enough for him to actually manage to run over the top of Kurt Stenberg, considering there's only roughly 7 laps left in this race. And, 8 laps left to run in this race.
As you look at the timing screens as well, you can see that while Stenberg was doing a 52 flat on the last lap, Devonish was 0.3 quicker at a 51.796. But that's not going to be enough. You can see here he's only gained about a 10th on this lap alone, and that was pretty much done in the middle sector. Of course, Kurt's very, very strong in the first sector of this lap. When we get to the line, we go and see what Stenberg's managed to do. Again, 52.1 for Stenberg that time around. Devonish at 51.9, so 2/10 only was the gain here. And that's the problem with such a very, very short circuit. This is the second shortest circuit on the calendar that we race. Believe it or not, Barbagallo is fractionally shorter by metres, not tens of metres, metres. It's probably about 4 or 5 metres shorter than Symmons Plains, and the lap goes just as quickly. Different type of circuit and different type of racing and setup required, but at very, very short circuits, of which there's actually a couple in the calendar, you only gain in very, very minuscule amounts because your margins needed to gain time are so finite that's why having the kind of advantage that Stenberg does right now at 3.5 seconds is so critical this late in the race.
Yeah, just seeing a bit of battle between, once again, Nolan and Peter. Peter's had a scruffy couple laps. He did pit fairly early to try and get the undercut on Foley, but he's been struggling a bit the last couple of laps, and now Nolan just ahead by a hair. But these two, a bit of animosity between the two after the last one, so it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out the final few laps.
Oh, he's had a bit of a moment, just sort of half lost the car around the second to last corner, and they're going to run side by side. They've run side by side for the 3 corners so far, 5, 6 and 7. They'll go line astern, will they? No. Nolan will stick it with him on the outside, on the inside here for 1. Just got a little bit of contact and just made a little bit of a right hash of that, as James May would say, and he's now gone up to, or back to P5, and Peter's now come out with a bit more of an advantage after that one.
It's a good effort though from Peter to hold on around the outside, around the last 2 corners there. I thought he was going to give up that position for sure, but was able to stick through it and able to hold on through turn 1. Obviously a bit of contact between the two, but Nolan just out-braking himself and Peter taking the position, but this battle is far from over.
Oh, Rhodey's just cleaning up, doing some lawn mowing there, cleaning up a few signs.
Yeah, a bit of rallycross for him just to try and get out of the way. I wouldn't advise
that.
As
Pete's around.
himself.
Yep, he's gone around. He that's what he was possibly going to do last time around on that. Oh, and round goes D2 as well. Yeah, so just gone around in sympathy there, D2, but he's not on the same lap. So that was a bit of a clumsy moment for Pete Savage. This is what he was very close to doing the last lap when him and Nolan went side by side, but he managed to control it. This time, he wasn't so lucky. Here it is. Just tried to gas it up a bit too much, and around he went.
Yeah, just overdriving it just a little bit to try and stay out in front of Nolan, and unfortunately, giving him a free kick. And a bit of a gap behind him to BDS, and barring mistake, probably not going to catch back up. He's actually lost position to Colin Warwick, who's stealthily moved his way up into P5 out of all this. He did pit very, very early on, and in 5th place, and it's been, well, we haven't seen him on camera all that much, but P5 and only 32 seconds off the leader, so a good drive from him.
Yeah, big mover of positions, up 16. He's managed to avoid all the chaos in the opening few laps, drove very, very smartly, finds his way up into P5. Arn's not long to go here. What's happening out there on track? I know that second camera's not giving us much joy. Anybody lighting up the timing screens that you suspect is going for a bit of glory here at the back end of this race?
I suspect Will Devenish is lighting up the timing screens at the moment. He's firmly in the 51s bracket, firmly in the high 51s. Meanwhile, Kurt Stenberg is in the low 52s, but fastest lap of the race to Will Devenish on lap 33, 51.721, and he made that happen with a purple middle sector. So pretty good run through the middle sector there. Must have had the benefit of a tow, and Will Devenish, he might get the fastest lap here if it keeps going, so we'll get his name on the board. But Kurt Stenberg, that gap is about 3 seconds ahead of him. And it looks like that Kurt Stenberg is going to take another victory, yet another victory in the Automobilista Australia Supercars Championship.
I tell you what, Lewis, it's going to take some beating to knock this guy off the top of his perch at the moment. He's driving very, very well. He was in a bit of a difficult position at the very beginning of this race where he made that mistake and ended up back at about P8, but then just luck just came his way, didn't it? Everybody else ahead of him just started to make some mistakes and everything just parted like the Red Sea, and here he is up the front of the field again.
Well, I guess there is a little bit of luck involved, but at the same time, he hasn't, since obviously dropping down the field early on, he didn't panic and make mistakes. We've seen Devenish was comfortably leading, but has made 2 massive errors, and now he finds himself chasing Stenberg, when if you look at the lap times, he's been closing the gap down. It's down to 2.4 seconds, and I think Will's finding out the hard way that there's a bit of a difference between being, say, a driver at the top of sort of sim racing, so to speak, a different tier, and to be in that group, you do need to have a clean run each and every time, which Stenberg has been this season. It's been clean, hasn't made 2 mistakes as he gets a little bit sideways out of the final corner, and is able to stick out of these incidents and avoid spins, which unfortunately for Devenish, he had this one. Gap is 1.8 seconds. He'll be hoping for some more lap traffic, but I think Devenish after this one, he'll be ruining this one being the race that got away for him.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. He had this one. He had a very, very nice margin. He made some very, very silly mistakes in the race where he didn't need to make them. He let that gap come back to Kurt's advantage, and Kurt didn't need a second chance. And then a few more mistakes after the pit stop sequence were done, and it was all over Red Rover. So 38 more laps are in the books. Zach Ross is going to be lucky, I think, here to stay on the lead lap. He's actually down there in, actually can't see him, he's actually down in P9 now. He's gone a lap down. So as Kurt Stenberg makes it 5 race wins on the season from 5 starts, 3 pole positions from qualifying, but 5 pole positions overall from the races to be undertaken, as of course it's a progressive grid. So well done. He stays perfect through the opening 3 rounds of the season. Will Devonish will take second, and then Brent Foley will come home in third place. So the top 3 as they finished the last race, as they started this race, and as they finished the second race of the night. Scott Nolan will be pretty pleased to drive his way back up to 4th place, having started from 8th. So that's a good result for the Smith & Sons Synergy Sim Racing Commodore. And then Colin Warwick. Well, what can we say about Colin Warwick here, Hans? 16 places. Managed to avoid the carnage, driving from the back of the grid as hard. Lewis did say you start anything out of the 3rd row of the grid, you're going to have a real challenge, but he's driven absolutely superbly to take that 5th place.
Yeah, disaster in the first race for Colin Warwick, but we didn't see, I don't think we saw much of him or even at all on the TV cameras, and Stephen, he shakes his head because we haven't seen him at all, and he's just a very quiet achiever, Colin Warwick. Peter Savage, bit in the wars and maybe a little bit of a question mark hanging over his head, bit of a cloud hanging over his head in terms of penalties and where his final finishing position will be. First of the Team HDS cars is Billy Dougal-Salonga and Liam Spencer. Pretty good showing this weekend, or this race weekend, I should say, tonight in Symmons Plains. He might keep that seat warm a little bit longer for Aaron Thomas. And we wish a speedy recovery to Aaron Thomas. Another of the loose Sim Sport cars, FGX Falcon for Zach Ross. And Lime Mitch, he rounds out the top 10 in the Monster Energy Mustang. And say Lime Mitch, he might be a little bit happy after this race to go back to Super 2, his happy hunting ground.
Well, there they are, some celebrations happening in the pit lane. I think the photographs have been done, and the top 3, getting the top 3 positions that, as we said, that they inherited in race 1 or earned in race 1, and now in race 2. And now there's a little bit of not the donuts that we see in TCR where it's the reverse does. This is just the old line locker burnouts that are going on right now.
Interesting to note that Brenton Foley, it's actually his welcome return to the podium. 2 podiums, 2 third places, and he actually qualified in 3rd as well. So welcome return to form for Brenton Foley.
Certainly was. And Lewis, from your point of view, pretty reasonable night's racing, actually. I think probably more above reasonable. There was some really good battles all night long. It just got a little bit chaotic at the opening start of that second race. There was plenty of collisions at the hairpin, and there will be obviously a few bits and pieces that need to be reviewed out of that one. But on the whole, a pretty successful night for most people.
Yeah, I think everybody sort of had a few guys that they were racing against, and I think outside a couple of guys, there's probably guys that would be a bit disappointed that, they could have finished a little bit higher if they hadn't have made a little mistake, but that's the nature of this circuit. But that first race in particular, fantastic racing for the lead between Devonish and Stenberg. We had the battle for the podium and for 4th place, and then further down we had battles all the way through. And yeah, there were some minor, incidents that will probably need to be looked at after the weekend is concluded. But on the whole, fantastic racing, and I don't think there's not going to be too many complaints with regards to the action that we saw out on the racetrack.
No, well, given what we'd seen in the last 2 GT3 rounds, where there were a little bit of shenanigans and a bit of bumping and a few avoidable accidents as well, it's good to see that a few people have been watching what's been happening, listening to what's been getting said, and listening to the drivers' briefings most importantly, and that a lot of the racing was pretty fair tonight. And good to see that as we're getting these bigger fields, that especially at a tight track like this, a lot of respect given and a lot of things going right for a lot of people. Well, speaking of things going right for a lot of people, our top 3 is there. And Hans, I think I might let you have a little bit of a chat, seeing as I did the last one. So you can have a chat in whatever order you so please with our top 3 in race 2.
It's a bit of a worry when Steve manages to let me loose on the top 3 place getters, but Brenton Foley, we'll start with you. Welcome return to form for you, mate, and qualifying in 3rd and 2 third places. How do you feel?
Overall, really happy. I knew from seeing practice times and that top three would probably be the goal tonight because Will and Stenny are kind of in a league of their own at this track. As I said last time, struggled at Sector 3, which was a lot harder in that race when the 100 board went missing, but managed to keep it on the track. And I'll just quickly say to everyone that was kind of a lap car tonight, from my point of view, they were really good. So, yeah, props to them.
Yeah, totally agree. The lap cars were very well aware of what was happening and what was going on around them. So, Brenton, I bet you were probably really scared when you saw Boki come across on the which part of the track am I thinking of? I'm thinking of the
The
hairpin.
hairpin.
When Peter Savage managed to just snooker him into the wall. What were you thinking?
Well, I was initially worried that I thought we actually had made, or we both had thought that we'd made wheel-to-wheel contact, and we thought it was kind of each other. But then when I was feeling my car and looking at the damage and things like that, I realized I hadn't got any damage at all. So we, for a couple of laps, we were a bit puzzled as to how it happened and kind of assumed that he got a bump from behind. But yeah, I was pretty worried when because we were in chats together. So I told him I was around the outside and was planning just to run 2x2, and all of a sudden he came shooting across in front of me. It was a bit freaky.
I imagine the PBF race radio would have been bleating expletives. But Brenton, well done tonight. Welcome return to form and good to see you up there.
Thanks very much.
On to our second place getter, who might be ruining what could have been because there were two very good opportunities in this race to end Kurt Stenberg's winning streak. And Will Devonish, you weren't able to do that tonight. But how was your race otherwise? A very good effort. Second place in qualifying and 2 second places. Good for your points chances. But how did you feel about the racing?
I feel like we need to change our name to Bridesmaid Engineering or something like that. Yeah. First race, I was fine with Kurt winning that one, but that second race, I felt I was, I think I was quite a bit faster than Kurt. Yeah, so the two main mistakes I made was that turn 2 going straight ahead. I was focusing on Kurt coming out of the pits and ruined that, and then coming off the end of the back straight, it sort of ruled out any sort of fight back, which is really disappointing. All through the race, when I wasn't off the track, I was taking time out of Kurt. So disappointing tonight, but lesson learnt, and we'll come back fighting next time.
However, there are some positive signs for you and the whole CRE Motorsport team, with Liam Spencer being up there, although he's warming the seat for Aaron Thomas, who's out injured. But yourself, your pace has been much closer to Kurt Stenberg than at the last few rounds. So pretty good to see, and hopefully that carries on in the future, doesn't it?
Yeah, hoping. Just need to focus on getting as much practice in. Maybe a bit more race practice than qualifying practice, but yeah, looking forward to the races to come.
Not the result you wanted tonight, but Will Devonish, congratulations on 2 second places tonight. Well done.
Thank you.
And on to our race winner, who carries on the streaks of race wins in this championship, and Kurt Stenberg, who is going to jam a stick through the spokes of your runaway machine?
Well, I don't know. Will probably should have just then, but he went off the track a few times. I don't know what I did on opening laps there where I went off at the hairpin, but that was pretty amateur hour from myself. And yeah, I don't think I really drove that well in that race, but unfortunately for me, Will went off the road a few times, which helped me win because I wasn't driving very well. I'll be straight out. That was not a. I don't feel like I deserved to win that race.
The fight back effort from yourself, Kurt, was actually pretty good, considering that the first lap mistake, or the first couple of laps mistake that you had there. But I guess it just shows that you're able to create a gap off the front and break away that way, or you're able to make your way through the field.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I got lucky there when I got back through the field, to be honest, with that mistake I made. That a bunch of other people were racing, there was a bit of a tangle up, and I got past a few people pretty easily in a bit of a incident that went on. But yeah, I don't know. I got back to the win, and yeah, I took the win. So, but yeah, I don't think I drove very well. So that's all I'm saying. I don't really, not going to celebrate this one too hard.
Well, Kurt, congratulations on yet another race victory, and you're pretty much running away with the championship at the moment, but Will Devonish is closing up on you, so congratulations.
Thanks, mate. Look forward to the next round in Pukekohe. I'll be there.
Speaking of the next round, that is precisely where we are heading, Pukekohe Park Circuit. We bring up our Supercars calendar, so that's the New Zealand Twin Sprint. That's going to be on the 30th of April, so that's a couple of weeks away. It's actually 3 weeks away to be precise, so a little bit of a gap in between now and the next race. But if you're still hankering for a little bit of racing action, there is actually plenty in store here at Automobilista Australia. In actual fact, we're in the middle of a very, very busy little patch. We seem to have these patches where there's a lot of races sort of clustered together in a very short space of time. I think it's actually 5 races in the space of 8 days that we're in the middle of right now. So we had GT3 on Tuesday night just gone. We've got Supercars tonight. That's just concluded. And here's what the rest of it looks like. So in actual fact, it's 6 races in the space of 8 days. So Super 2 from Barbagallo, Lewis Wedding. He's in the channel here. He's going to be taking the reins for the commentary in that one alongside Brennan Ross for the run tomorrow night at Barbagallo Raceway, which is another track that we visit on the Supercars calendar. It is the shortest track on the Supercars and Super 2 calendar that we visit. So that's a couple of sprint races tomorrow night. I think 3 races, correct me if I'm wrong there, Lewis?
Yep, it will be 3 races, and if it's anything like the last couple of rounds of Super 2, it's going to be quite hectic.
Then we get to the Track Day Challenge, which is after the Easter weekend. It's on the Monday, the 13th of April. So that's just the series that is a little bit of fun. If you want to come along and try your hand at driving some different cars on some different circuits, then come along and have a go at that. Taruma with the chicane layout, one of the inbuilt tracks, is the next venture for that. And then it's TCR Oz's first venture to the Bend Motorsport Park. As Lewis said earlier in the broadcast, some people love it, some people hate it, but it is the first time that we have run any race at the Bend Motorsport Park. See it a bit later on in the year in Supercars, but that'll be on the Loose 89 channel on Tuesday next week. And then Wednesday next week, all the live streams continue. Out of the Short Shift Motorsport podcast, Michael the Floodman Zalavari and Chris Riddell, or Chris Kiwi Riddell, as I think he likes to be called, are going to be bringing you all the action from the TCAC all-wheel drive series from Hidden Valley Raceway. Again, another one of the circuits we go to in Super 2 and in Supercars this year. Hans, plenty of racing, and I can't wait till we get to the next stream that we're going to have in a couple of weeks, which will be GT3 from Bathurst in about a week and a half's time, and then following that, back to Supercars again.
Keen for that, always keen for a race at Bathurst, and I'm hoping everyone else is keen for another race at Bathurst because it always manages to bring everyone out of the woodwork. But also here at Automobilista Australia, we've got something for you. We've got Supercars, we've got TCR, we've got TCAC, and we've got Track Day Challenge. It's fantastic, and it's just great to see the variety that we have in our little racing fraternity.
And to think of what else is to come later on in the year as well. There's still a few things yet to be revealed between now and the end of the year that might appeal to a few different people, but we'll talk about those another day. For now, happy Easter everybody. Enjoy the long weekend. Enjoy your sim racing, and it's been great having you aboard for tonight's broadcast. So, as always, please drive safely, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.